My family is very close. We try to go on vacation together at least 2 to 3 times a year. If someone can't join us, we always bring them a souvenir. My name is Jenny, I'm 27 years old, and I live with my family. My dad is often busy with work, and my sister is married and lives on her own, so usually, it's just my mom and my grandfather at home. Lately, though, something seems off about my sister. Even when she visits, she looks sad. I asked her, "What's wrong, sis? You seem different lately," she replied. "I'm fine, really," but I noticed she hadn't smiled in a while. I wondered if something was wrong with her in-laws. She quickly got defensive and said, "No, everything is fine. Stop saying strange things." Then she lost her temper and left for her in-laws' house. She didn't seem happy about it. A few days later, my sister came back, looking very scared. I asked her, "What's wrong? You look terrified," she said. "I'm not terrified," but I could see she was shaking. "What happened?" I pressed her. She replied, "Oh, it's just a bit cold." I was really worried about her. Soon after, my sister's husband, Sean, came to our house. He seemed relieved to see her. "So, you're here. We were worried," he said. "Sorry for the trouble." She got a little homesick. "Let's go home." Rachel, my sister, left with him, but she looked desperate. I asked my mom, "Don't you think something is wrong with my sister?" Mom agreed, saying she noticed how scared Rachel looked when Sean arrived. We both worried that Rachel might be mistreated at her in-laws' house. One day, I decided to visit my sister's in-laws. Her mother-in-law, Layla, welcomed me at the door and said, "Oh my, it's been a while. Jenny, what brings you here?" I told her, "My sister has been acting strange, and I wanted to see if everything is okay." Layla replied, "Everything is fine here. There's nothing unusual." As we talked at the door, I heard a loud noise from inside the house. I asked, "What's happening? What's that noise?" Layla just said, "I don't know. I'm busy today. You should go home." I wanted to go inside, but she wouldn't let me. I tried to check on my sister, but I ended up being turned away. A few days later, something shocking happened. My sister came back home crying. "What's wrong, sis? Are you okay? What happened?" I asked my sister as she cried. She couldn't tell me what was wrong, and when I looked closely, I noticed bruises on her body. It seemed like Layla and Sean had hurt her. "This is awful. How could they do this?" I held my sister tightly, both of us crying together, but there was something even more troubling on her mind. "The baby, our baby," she said. My sister already had a child, but the baby was still very young and couldn't take care of himself. I noticed she hadn't brought the baby with her. "Where's the baby? What happened?" I asked. Through her tears, she replied, "They hurt our baby." "What do you mean they hurt him? What did they do?" I pressed her. "I've been putting up with Sean's abuse and my mother-in-law's unreasonable behavior for so long, but when I finally fought back, they threatened the baby." "That's horrible," I exclaimed. She had been enduring so much just to protect the baby, but then her voice trembled, and she couldn't speak anymore. At that moment, our grandfather arrived. "What's going on? What happened?" he asked. My sister, still crying, explained everything to him. After hearing the story, Grandpa said only, "Huh." Then, he picked up the phone. "Who are you calling?" I asked, but he didn't answer. He just said, "We're going to their house." So, he took Mom, my sister, and me in the car and drove us to Layla and Sean's home. About 10 minutes later, we arrived. Layla greeted us and said, "What a surprise to see the whole family here." She acted like she didn't know anything was wrong. "I heard that you hurt my granddaughter and my great-grandchild," Grandpa said quietly. Layla just laughed and replied, "Who cares? It's not a big deal. It's all her fault anyway." She pointed at my sister. I was confused about what my sister could be blamed for. Layla said my sister had told Sean to eat less sausage because it wasn't healthy, but he ate it every day. "What's wrong with letting him eat what he likes?" my sister asked. "And you hurt my granddaughter over that?" Grandpa asked, upset. Layla dismissed it, saying, "You're making a fuss over nothing. It's ridiculous for you to come all the way here with your whole family. Are you all fools?" She laughed, showing no shame. Grandpa was quiet, but I could see he was really angry from the lines on his forehead. Just then, Sean, my sister's husband, showed up. "Hey, Rachel, you're finally back. Did you go to your parents again? I was worried about you," he said, but he didn't seem worried at all. "Why is the whole family here?" he asked. Grandpa replied, "We're here to take you down." "Take down? What's this old man talking about?" Sean replied, looking confused. Layla and Sean laughed, but then Grandpa started to laugh, too. What are you laughing at? Sean asked angrily. Grandpa said, I was just thinking about what's going to happen to you soon. They should arrive any minute now. What are you talking about? Sean questioned. Just then, one car after another began to pull up and park in front of Layla and Sean's house. What's happening? I wondered aloud as people started getting out of the cars. Soon, a crowd surrounded the house. There must have been about 30 people. I recognized many of them. They were all my relatives. What on earth? Who are all these people? Why are so many here? I asked in shock. They're my family, Grandpa said. They heard my precious granddaughter had been mistreated and wanted to step in. Sean complained. You're crowding in front of our house like this. You're being a nuisance. Well then, let's go inside, Grandpa said. He led our relatives into the house, and despite Sean's protests, we followed him inside. In the living room, I saw my sister's baby crying. Oh no, his face is all swollen. My sister cried as she quickly picked him up. I was terrified to think they had been hurting the baby while my sister was away. Did you really hurt such a small child? I asked, concerned. Sean and Layla replied, that's not it. This was unavoidable. We didn't want to do this. Layla explained. The baby wouldn't stop crying, so we had no choice but to hit him. You don't hit a child just because they won't stop crying, I said, feeling furious. Layla and Sean were not thinking clearly. I can't forgive this. How dare you do this to my family? Some of our relatives are police officers, and we can report you for assault. Grandpa was angry as he spoke. Wait, you have police officers? But isn't this a civil matter? Sean asked, trying to defend himself. Not necessarily. If there's evidence of assault, it can become a police matter, Grandpa replied. He checked with our relatives, and they agreed. After what they did to my sister and the baby, I won't be satisfied until they're taken away by the police. But Layla and Sean kept making weak excuses. There's no need to push this hard. We just need to make sure this doesn't happen again, Layla said, her voice shaking. It seemed she realized how serious this was. Rachel, say something, Sean pleaded. We didn't do anything wrong, did we? It was just a little rough handling. My sister stayed quiet and looked down. Hey, say something, Rachel, we're married, right? Help me out here, Sean yelled. Grandpa stepped in front of my sister, angry. How dare you talk to my granddaughter like that? He shouted. Sean tried to argue, but Grandpa stood his ground. Enough is enough. By your logic, no matter how much you hurt Rachel, we can't intervene because we're not family. How can we just stand by? Grandpa's rage was strong, and Sean looked scared and started to cry. Wait just a minute, you barged into our house, isn't that trespassing? If I call the police, won't you get arrested? Sean shouted. We're willing to face any punishment for that, Grandpa said firmly, but you need to understand that what you're doing is much worse than trespassing. Wait, what are you saying? Layla started to cry. Suddenly, Layla charged into the crowd of relatives. What do you think you're doing? She shouted. As Grandpa tried to stop her, Layla lunged at my sister. What were you thinking? Calling all these people? You're causing us problems. Go home now. Layla shook my sister by the shoulders. Fix this right now. Stop it. Let go, my sister cried. Grandpa pulled Layla away forcefully. Wow, throwing a fragile woman like that? How cruel. Layla tried to provoke him, but Grandpa didn't back down. The problem is you attacking Rachel just now. It's not my fault. We were living peacefully, and then this happens because of her, Layla exclaimed. You might have been living in peace, but Rachel wasn't. It seems you've been very cruel to her, even to your own grandchild. How can you be so shameless? Grandpa said. I'm not being shameless, I'm just stating the facts, Layla argued. Rachel, say something. You've been silent this whole time. This is all your fault, Layla shouted at my sister. Finally, my sister looked up and spoke. Mother-in-law, I don't want to live in this house anymore. What are you talking about? Layla replied, confused. You and Sean have always treated me terribly. I never thought my marriage would be like this. I want a divorce. A divorce? Layla exclaimed in shock. My sister must have been holding back her feelings for a long time to protect her child, but with the support of Grandpa and Mom, she found the courage to declare her decision with determination in her eyes. Don't joke around. I'll never agree to a divorce. You're going to live as my servant forever, Sean yelled back. No way, I'm not your tool, and I won't let you control me, my sister shot back. Grandpa was impressed by her strong stance. You're definitely my granddaughter. When you decide to act, You really act, he said. This isn't the time for this conversation. I won't allow a divorce. I need a servant too. If you're saying you'll divorce, then you need to pay Sean compensation. Why would I owe any compensation? My sister asked, confused. Of course you owe us. You've been a pain in the neck for Sean all this while. You owe us a few $1,000,000 in damages, Layla said. Hold on, that's out of line. Grandpa jumped back into the conversation. You've been the problem. You've treated Rachel and my great-granddaughter horribly. You should be the ones paying damages in the divorce. What? There's no way we're paying that. Besides, we don't have that kind of money, Sean protested. I won't accept any excuses. You'll pay, even in installments. We have lawyers in the family, so don't think you can just run away, Grandpa insisted. What, you even have lawyers? Sean sounded worried. Mom, what are we going to do? Should we apologize? Layla asked. What are you talking about? We don't even know if an apology will be accepted, my mom replied. But if the company finds out we're getting divorced, it will become awkward at work, Layla worried. Work? Grandpa seemed to remember something when he heard that. Come to think of it, I think I've heard of Rachel's husband's company somewhere. I remember now. Do you work for the company run by my relatives? What, you have relatives there too? Layla asked, shocked. There are plenty of punishments waiting for you, but trespassing isn't the worst of your crimes, Grandpa said. We'll need to address that first. Fired? Not just divorced, but fired? Don't joke around. I absolutely won't allow that, Sean shouted. Do you think saying you don't want to get fired will let you off the hook? Reflect on what you've done, Grandpa said firmly. Mom, do something, I'm going to get fired, Sean cried out. You people, this is outrageous. It's unfair to pile all this on us, Layla complained. Who was the one doing outrageous things first? I've only been protecting my adorable granddaughter. Grandpa's eyes were stern as he glared at Layla and Sean. They looked so frightened they couldn't even respond. Let's end this conversation here, Rachel. You can rest easy. Our relatives will handle the rest. Thank you, Grandpa, my sister said as they were leaving her in-laws' house. But Layla and Sean started crying out in despair. Wait, we were wrong. Please don't go through with the divorce. I'm begging you, Sean shouted desperately. But my sister didn't look back. She got into Grandpa's car, and they drove away. You should give up. Everything that's happened is your own doing, Layla yelled after them. Why did this have to happen? It's all Mom's fault, Sean complained. I'm not the one at fault here. You are, my mom shot back. Sean and Layla continued arguing until they were out of sight. We went home after that, leaving the legal matters to our family lawyer, the police, and the owner of Sean's company. In the end, my sister was able to divorce Sean and even got a settlement. Sean was fired from his job and had a hard time finding a new one. Finally, my sister was free, and she couldn't help but cry tears of joy. A while later, we noticed Sean hanging around our house. He seemed to want to reconcile with my sister, but she had no intention of that happening. The moment Grandpa saw Sean, he was furious. He immediately called our family member who was a police officer and had Sean arrested for stalking. After that, a restraining order was placed on Sean, and he stopped coming around our house. Finally, peace returned to our home. My sister said she plans to raise her baby with the support of our family for a while. I also help take care of the baby, and we enjoy our life together as a wonderful family.
Clean up your room now. Do you think you're in a position to take a break? Annie's voice cut through the air as she splashed beer on me. The sticky liquid clung to my skin, and the pungent smell of alcohol filled the room. I stood there, stunned by the suddenness of her actions. Annie continued to hurl words at me, but I couldn't grasp what she wanted. I was lost, unsure of what to do or how to respond. Just then, a voice echoed from the computer. The instant I recognized who it was, Annie, who had been red with anger, suddenly froze. Her body tensed, and she collapsed to the floor. My name is Karen, and I'm 33 years old. I work as an administrator at a local company, managing documents and crunching numbers with my calculator. Even though I often thought about using the computer more efficiently, I wasn't in a position to make such suggestions. I had to tread carefully around my superiors, attending company parties out of obligation. My mental health was nearing its limit. There's another mistake in this number. I'm sorry, but you've been making more errors lately. Be careful. Fatigue was taking its toll, leading to more mistakes, and my confidence in my work was crumbling. I began to wonder if quitting this job might be the best option. That's when a man from outside the company started visiting. His name was Andy, the man who would later become my husband. At first glance, Andy's gentle nature was obvious. Even during simple greetings, he treated me with warmth and kindness. Over time, I found myself completely captivated by him. But I lacked the courage to express my feelings, assuming Andy didn't share the same interest. However, a few months after he started visiting the company, Andy surprised me by showing an active interest. Dinners after work turned into dates, and after about 2 years, we decided to get married. After our wedding, I left my job to start a new life with Andy. We visited many properties together, searching for a home we both loved. I was excited about the future, looking forward to the wonderful days ahead. But the life that awaited us was far from what I had imagined. Just a month after our wedding, I began noticing something off about Andy. "Welcome home, Andy. You're back early," I greeted him, but he didn't even look at me. His response was curt. This behavior, so different from before, worried me. He seemed out of sorts, slightly irritated. "Are you okay? You look tired." "Huh? Yeah," he replied, but his mood remained distant. At the time, I'd attributed it to exhaustion and didn't think much of it. But the next day, and the days that followed, Andy's behavior stayed the same. His words, his demeanor, even his actions, like coming home late without any notice, became more careless. I wondered if I had said something to upset Annie. I kept replaying my actions, words, and thoughts about her, trying to pinpoint where I might have gone wrong. But even as time passed, I couldn't figure out what had changed. Then, a few months after Annie's behavior shifted, the situation took a dramatic turn. One evening, during dinner, Annie suddenly began hurling harsh words at me. She hadn't even taken a bite of her food when she said, "Karen, you get it." "Get what?" I asked, taken aback by her abruptness. There was no clear context, and I was unsure how to respond. Without hesitation, she replied, "Your cooking tastes awful." "Awful? Really?" I stammered, shocked by her words. "Yeah, haven't you noticed? I wish you knew how I feel, having to eat such terrible food every day." Throughout our relationship, I had frequently cooked for her, and she had never criticized my cooking like this before. In fact, she used to enjoy the meals I made, often expressing her appreciation. The thought that she now found my cooking unpalatable was completely unexpected. "But you used to enjoy my cooking," I remarked, still trying to process her sudden change in attitude. "Did I?" she replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Seeing my surprised expression, Annie burst into laughter. When she finally stopped, she tossed her knife and fork onto the table and headed to the bedroom, leaving her food untouched. As I stared at the uneaten meal in front of me, I was overwhelmed with mixed emotions. Had she been silently enduring my cooking all this time, or had my skills really declined? No matter how much I pondered it, I couldn't make sense of the situation. I couldn't reach a satisfying conclusion, but one thought kept crossing my mind. Considering Andy's recent behavior and harsh remarks, perhaps he doesn't love me anymore. I used to think he was just tired, but his recent actions seemed excessive. The Andy I knew would have been upfront if something was bothering him. If that's the case, I can't help but wonder if I've done something to offend him. But try as I might, I can't recall doing anything wrong. As my doubts about Andy grew, another 2 months passed, and he became even colder. The warmth and kindness he once showed when we were dating had completely vanished. He started snapping at me daily, showing irritation over the smallest things. "Did you even clean?" he snapped one day. "What? Clean what?" I replied, confused. "The bathroom isn't clean, and the living room is a mess too. I always try to keep the house tidy. I vacuum and organize every day, doing my best to maintain our home. But now, I wondered how much more I needed to do to satisfy him. What was I supposed to do? As I wallowed in disappointment, Andy showered me with even more criticism. But of all the hurtful words he said, the one that stung the most was, "Why did I ever marry a woman like this?" Was his past love for me just an illusion? The thought made tears well up in my eyes. "Wait, are you crying? I hope that's not just an act," he scoffed. Once he would have comforted me, now all he offered were cold words. He gave a dismissive snort before heading to the bedroom. We used to share the bed, but lately I've been sleeping elsewhere. More often than not, the living room sofa has become my bed. I felt belittled and ignored by Andy, yet I couldn't figure out what had gone wrong. I lacked the courage to end our relationship because deep down, I still believed in Andy. Unfortunately, my feelings went unnoticed, and his behavior only worsened. "Hey, where's the food?" he'd demand, only to criticize it moments later. "Who can even eat this?" I had suggested eating out several times, but he never agreed and never explained why. The moment he returned from work, he'd start complaining about the dirt at the entrance, the state of the bathroom, or something else, and then sharply demand food. As I noticed the change in his behavior, I tried to figure out the cause. But eventually, I realized he was probably just using me as an outlet for his stress. The inconsistencies in his actions and the way he vented led me to that conclusion. I understood that work could be tiring for Andy, but I wasn't a robot. The constant complaints were taking their toll on me. "Andy, I need to talk to you about something," I said with determination. "I'm stressed from always hearing complaints from you. I know work tires you out, but taking it out on me isn't fair." He looked at me surprised. "What are you talking about?" "I mean every word. Every time you come home from work, you lash out at me, but I'm doing my best too." He smirked, as if mocking my words, but then his face turned red with rage. "You're just a housewife, but the house isn't even clean, and your cooking is terrible. Why shouldn't you get complaints? I can't stand seeing you so relaxed. If there's a specific problem, tell me and I'll try to improve," I offered, trying to find a way to make things better. "No point telling you," he snapped. "You won't change anything. You should figure out what you're doing wrong." He kept dodging my questions, and from this conversation alone, it was clear he only saw me as an outlet for his stress. Expressing my feelings only strained our relationship further. His words grew harsher, and his cold attitude became more prevalent. The happy times we once shared were now a distant memory. I longed for those moments in silence, but my sighs only grew deeper as the days passed. I received a call from an unexpected person, my mother-in-law. We didn't usually communicate often, so I was curious as I answered the phone. "Hello, Karen, how have you been?" She greeted me warmly. I could feel the kindness in her voice, even through the phone. After a bit of chit-chat, she made a surprising proposition. "Handmade crafts?" she asked. "Yes, Karen, didn't you mention that you create handmade items? I've become interested and was wondering if you'd be willing to teach me." I was taken aback. I had been enjoying handmade crafts as a hobby, gathering materials and tools, and immersing myself in my work whenever Andy wasn't around. I had mentioned it to my mother-in-law once but hadn't expected her to remember. "Of course I'd love to," I replied, excited by the idea. That conversation led to us speaking more frequently over the phone. At first it was just regular calls, but as we wanted to show each other our work and explain the materials in detail, we started video calling. Though we didn't live too far apart, visiting regularly was difficult. So at the agreed upon times, I would sit in the room filled with my crafting tools, and we'd craft together while video chatting. The weariness in my heart, caused by Andy's behavior, felt somewhat eased during these chats with her. "How has Andy been lately?" she asked one day. "I rarely hear from him, so I'm curious." "Oh, he's fine," I answered, keeping my tone light. "That's good to know." I hadn't shared the recent troubles with Andy with my mother-in-law, preferring to keep those issues to myself for now. I didn't want to burden her with my troubles. Our time together allowed me to forget about Andy for a while. Even though his behavior remained unchanged and I continued to struggle, I kept all of that hidden from her. But one day, a few weeks after we started video calling, something unexpected happened. After preparing food and cleaning the house, I was video chatting with my mother-in-law when suddenly the door slammed open. It was Andy. I turned to see him standing near the door, holding something in his hand. He seemed completely unaware of the ongoing video call and slowly approached me. "What are you sneaking around doing in here? Did you finish cleaning?" "What about the laundry?" he demanded. "I've already done that," I replied, trying to keep calm. "You saw me doing housework, didn't you?" "I didn't," he snapped. Andy had been engrossed in watching TV in the living room, so his reply wasn't unexpected. "You're always watching TV," I muttered. "What? You're annoying," Andy yelled. "Clean this room now. Do you think you can just take a break?" Then, without warning, he threw what he was holding at me. The smell hit me instantly. It was beer. My clothes were soaked, sticky with the scent of alcohol clinging to them. Andy looked amused by the scene he had just caused. I was so shocked that I couldn't find any words. Once you understand, get on with the task, he barked before kicking over a pile of books nearby. His displeased laughter echoed throughout the room. I said nothing, just staring at the books soaked in beer. At that moment, an unexpected voice rang out, cutting through the tense silence. Is that all you have to say? The voice was familiar, and it was coming from the computer. It was Andy's father, my father-in-law. Dad? Andy's voice wavered, his intimidating presence suddenly fading into fear. I saw everything, my father-in-law said sternly, yelling at Karen, throwing beer at her. What were you thinking? It's not what you think, Dad. It's a misunderstanding, Andy stammered, visibly shaken by his father's anger. A misunderstanding? What do you mean by that? His father demanded. It seems like this isn't the first time something like this has happened, is it? When did you become like this? My father-in-law's voice was filled with disappointment, the kind that cuts deep. Andy stood silent beside me, no longer the domineering figure he had been just moments before. Then my father-in-law turned to me with an unexpected offer. Karen, would you come over to our place? Right away. I'm worried about you staying there with Andy. If it's okay with you, I'll come to pick you up right now. His offer caught me off guard, but as I considered it, I realized how unpredictable things could become if I stayed alone with Andy. Are you sure it's okay? I asked hesitantly. No problem at all, he'd assured me. Then, turning back to Andy, he warned, if you harm Karen anymore, I will never forgive you. With that, he ended the call. I hurriedly packed a few things and waited at the entrance. Andy, visibly unsettled, didn't say a word or try to stop me. After a while, my father-in-law arrived. The moment he stepped through the door, Andy's face showed an unprecedented level of fear. Andy, you better reflect on your actions tonight. Do you understand? His father said firmly. Andy simply nodded, his fear palpable. Please forgive me, Andy stammered. What are you saying? Apologize to Karen, not me. Remember that, and think hard. After scolding Andy, my father-in-law escorted me outside. Although I had changed into clean clothes, I hadn't had time to shower and still felt sticky. My father-in-law gently wrapped a towel around me and guided me to the car. We soon arrived at his house, where my mother-in-law welcomed us with concern. Karen, are you all right? She asked, hugging me warmly. Yes, I'm sorry, I replied. My mother-in-law led me to the bathroom, handing me towels and a change of clothes. Take your time, she said. Here are towels and fresh clothes. Thank you so much. In the midst of the whirlwind, my emotions were in turmoil. After bathing, I changed into the clothes that had been prepared for me and joined my in-laws in the living room. My father-in-law had a serious expression, while my mother-in-law looked anxious. Thank you for everything, I said. You're welcome, my mother-in-law replied. Was the water temperature okay? Yes, it was perfect, I answered, sinking into the sofa. Karen, can you tell us what happened? My father-in-law asked. I hesitated, unsure where to begin. So that wasn't the first time, was it? No, it wasn't, I admitted. Please tell us, Karen. I took a deep breath and carefully chose my words. My in-laws listened attentively as I explained the events following our marriage and why I had kept it from them until now. They absorbed every detail. So that's why I came to this. My father-in-law said after a moment, You should have told us sooner. We would have understood. I didn't want to worry you, I replied, my voice breaking slightly. I understand how you feel, Karen. You shouldn't have kept silent about someone like him, my mother-in-law said gently. Yes, I'm sorry, I said, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. Though they scolded me softly, their concern was evident, and I felt they genuinely cared about me. There was a brief silence as my in-laws processed everything. After a few minutes, my father-in-law finally broke the silence. Karen, do you still love Andy? Pardon? I have a feeling he'll just repeat his mistakes, my father-in-law said firmly. For your sake, I think it's best if you divorce him. Decisions like this are best made quickly. My mother-in-law, sitting beside him, nodded in agreement. Divorce Andy, she urged. I was taken aback by the suggestion from his parents. The idea of divorce seemed so final, and despite everything, I still loved him. The thought of him never changing troubled me deeply, yet I felt torn. They waited silently for me to decide. After some thought, I made up my mind. I will divorce Andy, I said. I had tried to make things work and offered countless suggestions, but he had ignored them all. I believed that if we continued as a married couple, he would only continue to treat me coldly. Relief washed over their faces at my decision. After discussing it further with my in-laws, I was determined to move forward with a divorce. I could finally distance myself from Andy. Although a part of me hoped he might change his mind, the overwhelming feeling I had when deciding to divorce was relief. The following week, I went to our house with my in-laws, carrying the court papers, including an affidavit of the defendant. When I rang the doorbell, I heard footsteps approaching, and Andy opened the door. "Karen, Dad, Mom," he greeted, clearly surprised and disappointed to see his parents standing there with me. It was evident he hadn't expected that I wouldn't come alone after everything that had happened. We entered the house and took a seat on the sofa, with my in-laws sitting on either side of me. Andy looked uncomfortable but didn't offer any apologies. I turned to face him directly. "Andy, let's get a divorce." "Divorce?" he repeated, sounding incredulous. "I've been thinking about it. I don't have the courage to envision a future with you anymore. Even if we lived together again, you'd probably repeat the same mistakes and forget what happened before." "That's not true," he said defensively. "Can you honestly claim that you've changed?" I asked. "You haven't even properly apologized for what happened up until last week. You're just offering lip service without showing any genuine regret." "I'm sorry," Andy said, startled by my words. But it was too late. The decision had been made. I had lost all sense of forgiveness toward him. It was too late for anything now. Standing by my in-laws, I reviewed the court papers with resolve. I faced Andy with newfound confidence. "Why would you say that?" I asked, trying to understand his reaction. "What were you thinking? After everything that happened last week, you didn't even apologize to me. It seems you never considered the possibility of divorce. If you truly understood the gravity of your actions, you wouldn't be so shocked by the mention of it." "I realize I made mistakes, but I don't think it's serious enough for a divorce," Andy protested. "Really?" I said, incredulously. "That's unbelievable." Andy seemed to freeze, his previous bravado gone. Though visibly troubled, he eventually agreed to the divorce. Not once did he show genuine remorse. As I packed my things to leave the house, I asked him, "Why did you start treating me so poorly after we got married? You weren't like this when we were dating." Hesitating, Andy replied, "I didn't want you to look down on me." "Did I ever make you feel that way?" I questioned. "No, you didn't," he admitted. "Stop imagining these absurd things," I said, shaking my head. I then left the house with my in-laws, knowing I would never return. I felt a pang of sadness as I left the home I had loved. After finalizing the divorce, I stayed with my in-laws. My financial situation as a housewife wasn't enough to start a new life alone, so their offer for me to stay was a relief. Initially, I felt uneasy, but I soon adapted to my new life and found joy in doing handmade crafts with my mother-in-law. Throughout this time, I received messages from Andy, who seemed unable to let go. However, after my father-in-law sent a firm message from my phone saying, "I'm cutting ties with you," Andy's communication ceased entirely. I suspected he hadn't anticipated that I'd be living with his parents. Perhaps he thought that keeping in touch after our divorce might lead to reconciliation. It felt as though he was looking down on me. I am genuinely grateful to my in-laws for suggesting the divorce. A year has passed since then, and while working part-time, I lead a fulfilling life on my own. Though I felt bad about relying on them too much, I decided to be independent even after leaving their home. My relationship with my in-laws remains strong, and they continue to support me. Though we are not related by blood, they welcome me with the warmth of a real family. My goal now is to show my gratitude towards them and find ways to bring them joy every day. I live with a heart full of appreciation for my in-laws. I lay on the cold kitchen floor, holding my side where I felt sharp pain spreading through my body. It felt like a knife was twisting inside me. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, stood nearby, her small face showing how scared she was. "Mommy, are you okay?" Lily's voice shook, barely louder than a whisper. I tried to sound calm despite the pain. I'll be fine, honey, just a bad stomach ache, I lied, trying to hide how serious it was. Footsteps echoed through the hallway as my husband David appeared in the doorway. His face showed annoyance instead of concern. He was ready for his trip, holding his suitcase. "What's going on, Evelyn? Why are you on the floor?" David asked, sounding annoyed. "I think it's appendicitis, David. It's really bad. We need to go to the hospital," I managed to say, each word hurting me. He scoffed. "Appendicitis? You're probably overreacting. It's likely just indigestion." "But David, I really think..." My words were cut off by a sharp pain, making me wince. David checked his watch, clearly impatient. "I can't miss this trip with Rachel. Just call a taxi or something." I couldn't believe it. "David, I can't even move. Lily's here. I need you," I begged, desperation in my voice. He shook his head, not caring. "I'm sure it's nothing. Call if it gets worse." And with that, he left, his suitcase trailing behind him. I was left alone in pain with Lily. Lily's small hands found mine, her tears matching my own. "Mommy, don't be sick. You have to be okay." I gathered what little strength I had and pulled Lily close. "I'm here, darling. Mommy's here." With David gone, I knew I had to act. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and called the only person I knew I could count on, my brother Michael. The phone rang, its sound piercing the quiet kitchen. "Hello," Michael's voice came through, a beacon of hope. "Michael, it's Evelyn. I need help. I think it's appendicitis. I can't move and Lily is scared," I managed to say, each word a struggle. There was a brief silence, then Michael's voice, calm and steady. "I'm on my way. Hold tight, Evelyn. I'll be there soon." Leaning against the cold tile floor, I closed my eyes, trying to endure the pain. Lily nestled close to me, a small comfort in the midst of turmoil. In that moment, a determination grew inside me. David's abandonment during my crisis wouldn't be forgotten. It was a deep hurt, a betrayal that marked a turning point. As I waited for Michael, one thing became clear: things would change. In the hospital bed later, surrounded by sterile walls and beeping machines, a sense of calm settled in. The surgery for my appendicitis went well, but David's emotional absence still stung. I had called my parents to care for Lily while I recovered, their voices filled with concern and unspoken questions about David's whereabouts. 3 days later, I was back home, the physical pain now a dull reminder of the recent ordeal. Lily greeted me eagerly, her face lighting up at my return. "Mommy, you're back. Are you all better now?" Her innocent question warmed my heart. "I'm getting there, sweetie," I replied, hugging her tightly, grateful for her presence. The peace of our reunion was shattered the next day by the slam of the front door. David and his sister Rachel burst in, their voices filled with frustration. "Why didn't you pick us up yesterday? We had to spend extra on a taxi and train fares." David's accusatory voice rang out as he entered the living room. I felt a surge of anger at his boldness. "Welcome back. Must have been quite a journey," I said coldly, locking eyes with him. David halted, taken aback by my icy reception. Even Rachel seemed surprised by the tension. "What's with the attitude, Evelyn?" David demanded. I couldn't hold back anymore. "While you were enjoying your trip, I was in a hospital," I said, my voice steady but simmering with anger. "And you, Rachel, always demanding David's time without considering his family." Rachel flushed and David appeared bewildered. "What are you talking about? You were fine, right?" he replied, sounding dismissive. "It's not just about being okay, David. It's about being there when your family needs you," I shot back, my frustration boiling over. Before David could respond, the living room door swung open, revealing Michael, our parents, and David's parents. 14 eyes, filled with varying degrees of anger and disappointment, fixed on David and Rachel. "Why is everyone here?" David's voice faltered, his confidence waning under their collective glare. Taking a deep breath, I channeled my pain and betrayal into words. "David, you left Lily and me alone when we needed you the most. I had to go to the hospital, and you weren't there. I've told everything to our families." David seemed to shrink under the weight of my words, his usual bravado absent. His eyes darted around, searching for support but finding none. "It's not just about this one incident, David. It's about all the times you've prioritized Rachel over your own family," my brother Michael added, his disappointment evident in his voice. Rachel, typically confident, appeared uneasy, shifting her gaze between the floor and the upset faces around her. David attempted to defend himself, offering excuses and justifications. The confrontation grew heated, tension thick in the air. But for me, it marked a turning point. I realized I couldn't continue living in the shadow of David's neglect. It was time for change, time to assert myself and protect Lily. The meeting concluded without resolution, but the message was clear. I had the support of both our families, and David's careless facade had been shattered. As they departed, David's parents glanced at me with sympathy, silently acknowledging their son's shortcomings. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, disappointment, but also a newfound strength. David had revealed his true self, and I knew it was time for me to take charge of my life. The days following the confrontation were tense with unspoken words. David tried to act as if nothing had changed, but the atmosphere between us was heavy. I spent that time reflecting, realizing the depth of my discontent and the necessity for change. The decision I reached wasn't easy, but it felt crucial, like a breath of fresh air after being stifled for so long. One evening, while David casually flipped through TV channels on the couch, I approached him with a folder in hand. My heart raced, but my determination held firm. "David, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. He glanced up, a hint of annoyance crossing his face. "What now, Evelyn?" I took a deep breath and handed him the folder. "I want a divorce." David stared at me, disbelief and mockery flashing across his expression. "Divorce? That's absurd, Evelyn. You're blowing things out of proportion." I shook my head, feeling a surge of empowerment. "It's not an exaggeration. I've thought long and hard about this. You've consistently prioritized Rachel over me and Lily. I can't continue like this." David sneered. "You think you can manage alone? Don't be naive, Evelyn." His words were meant to hurt, but I stood firm. "I'm not naive, David. I understand what this means, but I'd rather face uncertainty than continue feeling invisible in my own marriage." He laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Good luck, Evelyn. You'll regret this once you realize how tough it is out there." I felt my anger rise, but I kept my composure. "I won't. This is my decision, and I'm sticking to it." For a moment, David seemed like he might argue further, but then he shrugged, a smug smirk on his face. "Fine, have it your way. But remember, I warned you." As he turned back to the TV, dismissing me once again, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. There was fear, certainly, but also a powerful sense of liberation. I was finally taking charge of my life, stepping out of the shadows. The next day, I started the legal process for divorce. It was overwhelming with all the paperwork and legal steps, but I was determined. My parents and Michael were supportive, offering help and encouragement. During this time, David's true nature became clearer. He was dismissive and uncooperative, trying to intimidate me into giving up. But I stood my ground, strengthened by my family's support and my growing sense of strength. As time went on, David's facade began to crack. The charming, confident man I married revealed himself to be selfish and manipulative, his true self exposed. The divorce proceedings were challenging, but I faced them bravely, each forward step a testament to my newfound determination. I was no longer the woman who lay on the kitchen floor, ignored and in pain. I was reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my happiness. The divorce process was exhausting, marked by David's constant attempts to undermine and demean me. In our meetings, he would sneer and make hurtful remarks about my parenting and my future without him. But instead of letting his words defeat me, they fueled my determination to break free from his toxic influence. "Enjoy your struggles, Evelyn," David taunted in one of our final meetings. "You'll soon see how good you had it with me." His arrogance infuriated me, but I remained composed. I'd rather face challenges every day than spend another moment with someone who has so little regard for his family, I replied firmly. David's smug demeanor briefly faltered, replaced by a flicker of anger. He quickly masked it with a scoff, but I could sense my words had struck a nerve. The day the divorce was finalized brought a strange mix of relief and nervousness. I was finally free from David, yet the road ahead seemed daunting. However, as I walked out of the courthouse, a wave of liberation washed over me. In the weeks following our divorce, David's life began to unravel. His neglectful behavior and our separation became the gossip of his workplace. Colleagues who had once admired him now looked at him with pity and disdain. His charming facade had crumbled, exposing the pettiness and selfishness beneath. News of our divorce spread throughout our community, largely due to my cousin, who was well connected in our neighborhood. David, who had always cared deeply about his image and reputation, found himself the subject of hushed conversations and judgmental stares. Rachel also faced criticism. Her role in our marital problems was now public knowledge, and friends and neighbors began to regard her with suspicion and disapproval. The bond she had with David, once unbreakable in her eyes, now seemed strained and uneasy. One evening, while picking up Lily from school, I overheard a heated argument between David and Rachel outside their house. Their voices dripped with blame and resentment. "It's your fault we're in this mess, Rachel," David yelled, his frustration palpable. "How dare you blame me? You're the one who couldn't hold your family together." Rachel shot back, her voice filled with anger. Their argument was a stark contrast to the united front they once presented. The discord sowed by their actions had finally come to fruition, and now they were facing the consequences. As I walked away with Lily, I felt a sense of vindication. David and Rachel were now grappling with the results of their selfish choices. It was a tough lesson, but one they had brought upon themselves. That night, as Lily slept peacefully in her room, I sat by the window reflecting on the past few months. The journey had been challenging, but it had brought me to a place of strength and self-respect. I had fought for my dignity and for Lily's future. Although the future was uncertain, I felt prepared to confront it with newfound confidence. In the aftermath of the divorce, life settled into a new rhythm, one that was quieter yet more fulfilling. The weight of my unhappy marriage had lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of independence. I began rebuilding my life step by step, with Lily by my side. My first priority was finding a job. The gap in my resume from years spent focusing on motherhood was a concern, but I was determined. After several interviews, I secured a position at a small accounting firm. The firm, led by a supportive woman who valued working mothers, offered a flexible and understanding environment. It was an ideal fit for me. Lily embraced the changes with the resilience that only children possess. She started kindergarten, making new friends and eagerly diving into learning. Her laughter and lively conversations filled our home with happiness, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere of the past. Yet despite these positive changes, reminders of my past with David lingered. One afternoon, while dropping Lily off at school, I overheard a group of parents whispering, "That's her, Evelyn. Her husband left her because he couldn't stand being around her anymore," one of them said. Their words stung, but I held my head high. The gossip and judgment were small prices to pay for the freedom and peace I now had. Meanwhile, David's life continued to unravel. His pride took a significant hit, and his once flawless reputation was now tarnished. I heard from mutual acquaintances that he had moved back in with his parents, a fact he tried to conceal but eventually became known. Rachel's situation wasn't any better. Her interference in our marriage had isolated her from many friends. The once close siblings were now barely on speaking terms, their relationship strained by blame and regret. As for me, I found solace in the unwavering support of my family. My brother Michael had moved closer to us, his presence a constant source of comfort. My parents showered Lily with love, their affection soothing the wounds of the past. One day, while savoring coffee in my kitchen, I reflected on the journey I had endured, the pain, the struggle, and ultimately, the liberation. It had all brought me to this moment of peace. I hadn't just survived, I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Opening it, I found David standing there, wearing a look of defeat. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone," he said, his apology, though belated, validating my decision. "Thank you, David," I replied gently, "but it's too late. I've moved on." As I closed the door on David and the life we once shared, a sense of closure washed over me. That chapter of my life had ended, and a new one was beginning. In this new chapter, I was the author of my own story, free to shape my future as I saw fit. Lily's voice called out from the living room, and a smile spread across my face. I walked towards her, eager to embrace the life that lay ahead, a life brimming with possibilities and hope.
This is where my parents live, Mark declared suddenly upon his visit. Behind him, his in-laws nodded happily. I found myself in the middle of an online meeting and quickly apologized to the other party before ending the call. Irritated, I turned my gaze towards the door. "Why did you come all of a sudden?" I asked them, maintaining my composure. My father-in-law proudly replied, "We'll pay off the mortgage, so please leave." It was hard to suppress a laugh at his statement. My mother-in-law had never worked, and my father-in-law was just staying at home without any employment. Yet Mark was completely in favor of his parents' opinion. Disappointed by his stance, I considered divorce. "I leave," I quickly replied, to the surprise of all three of them. "The mortgage of the house is $5,000 per month." With an inward smile, I began to pack seriously. Luckily, I had a business trip scheduled for a week starting for the next day. With my suitcase and bank book ready, I headed to the entrance. "Goodbye," I said as I left the house. First, I'd start by transferring the house's title to Mark. I felt excited thinking about my future plans. My name is Shyle Owen. I am 47 years old and work as a web designer. I went independent 5 years ago and have been fortunate enough to receive many project checks. As a result, I've earned more than 5 times my previous salary and now live on the top floor of a high-rise condo. I met Mark, my husband, 3 years ago through Ashley, my former boss, and his cousin. He's kind and honest, but had trouble maintaining relationships, so he had been single for a long time. Around that time, my business was doing well, and I bought the top floor of a high-rise condo, doubling as an office. I wasn't planning on marrying, but Ashley strongly suggested I meet Mark. When I met him, he was very gentle and attractive, looking much younger than his actual age. We started dating and got engaged within 6 months. My parents had already passed away, and my only relative was my brother. So my brother and his wife also attended the family meeting. From Mark's side, his parents and cousin Ashley came. The meeting went smoothly overall. However, my sister-in-law's comment, "This seems stiff," left me puzzled. I never imagined her words would become a reality. After marrying, Mark moved into my house, and we started our life together. His workplace was harsh, requiring him to leave early in the morning and return home past midnight. Despite this, his salary was only a quarter of mine. I suggested to Mark, who was exhausted and went to sleep immediately every day, "It's bad for your health. Why don't you look for another job?" However, he reprimanded me with a face full of anger. "Are you saying I should quit my job? Are you looking down on me because I earn less?" I was surprised by Mark's strong reaction, as we had never argued before. Feeling uncomfortable about unintentionally disrespecting his job, I decided to apologize sincerely. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I'm just worried about your health." Mark quickly calmed down and apologized. Our first argument ended swiftly. However, it became difficult to suggest a job change afterward. Mark's return time got even later, and he eventually spent half the week at the office. While I was concerned about his health, he seemed to enjoy his job. So I decided to support him as much as I could, creating a relaxing environment whenever he returned home. "Hey, about my dad's medical expenses, could we increase the remittance a bit?" Mark suggested this when his father was in the hospital with back pain. Sighing inwardly at his request in his father's hospital room, I didn't hesitate to help my in-laws, as I had no parents of my own. Our household depended on my income, with Mark contributing a part of his salary to his parents. His salary wasn't low for a man in his 40s, but the exact amount he kept for himself was unclear. However, it was evident he was providing enough for his parents not to struggle. I couldn't agree when he insisted on increasing the remittance because it was possible only due to my income. Yet it was hard to refuse in front of his parents. "Mark, you're really kind. Thank you so much. It's a big help," they said, looking at me and Mark under their pressure. I reluctantly agreed to increase the remittance. Afterward, my in-laws started demanding money for various reasons, not just the remittance. I wanted to refuse, but they knew I would say no, So they approached Mark instead. Especially weak to his mother's requests, Mark often decided to increase the remittance whenever she asked. On the day his father returned from the hospital, after sending my in-laws off in a taxi, Mark and I returned home, only to find surprisingly that his parents, who were supposed to have gone home, were waiting outside our house. It's tough for Dad to climb our stairs, so I thought we'd take care of him here until his back is fully healed. What? You can't just spring that on me. My surprised reaction made my mother-in-law frown. My father-in-law stood in front of the door as if to say, "Let us in quickly, Mark." "That's okay, right?" Mark replied, and I stared at him in shock. He avoided my gaze from his reaction. As I observed the situation, it became apparent that Mark and his parents had likely already discussed their plans. "Fine, you can stay here until you're fully recovered." I reluctantly relented, ushering my in-laws inside. They surveyed the house and settled onto the living room sofa. "Look at this place, so nice. Our house is 50 years old and falling apart," remarked my father-in-law. "Yeah, it's really showing its age," agreed my mother-in-law. Mark nodded along, indicating their intention to stay for an extended period. Admittedly, since I had been providing them with financial support, having them here might ease the burden. However, financial considerations aside, it didn't mean I welcomed the idea of cohabiting. Renovating old houses is trendy these days. How about considering that, Mark? I suggested. "Yeah, maybe," Mark replied vaguely. 2 years into our marriage, despite being in the supposed honeymoon phase, Mark and I hardly spent time together. We hadn't even gone on a honeymoon. This place served as both my home and office. It was manageable when Mark was out for work, but with my in-laws around all day, it complicated things. If we were to live together, I'd rather move into their house and reserve this place solely as an office. Thanks to my initial resistance, the topic of cohabitation wasn't brought up again by my in-laws. However, even months after my father-in-law's discharge from the hospital, my mother-in-law showed no sign of taking him back. Their belongings started to overflow from the guest room into the living room. "Mark, your dad seems perfectly healthy now. He even went bowling today. Maybe it's time for them to go home," I suggested. "What are you saying? Sending my dad back with his bad back is cruel. What if it gets worse?" Mark raised his voice, leaving me silent. It seemed that Mark believed raising his voice would compel compliance. He frequently asserted his opinions loudly, and opposing him often resulted in my mother-in-law siding with him, putting me at a disadvantage. This dynamic persisted for 2 years. During this time, I took care of all the housework, while my in-laws frequently went out to enjoy themselves. Despite my father-in-law's back being fully healed, there were no signs of them returning home. "Sorry, I have a meeting at 1:00 p.m. today, so I'll eat lunch in my room, okay?" I informed them as I placed lunch on the table. "Understood, but leave the dishes for later," my mother-in-law replied without looking up. As the clock struck 1:00 p.m., my online meeting commenced. However, about 10 minutes in, the door burst open, and Mark declared, "This is where me and my parents live." My in-laws nodded behind him. I swiftly apologized to the meeting participants and ended the call, inwardly frustrated. "I told you I had a meeting at 1:00 p.m., I grumbled as I headed towards the door. "Why are you doing this all of a sudden?" I asked calmly, only to be met with my father-in-law's smug reply, "We'll pay the mortgage so you can leave." Suppressing a laugh at his audacity, I simply replied, "All right, I'll leave," surprising all 3 of them. With the mortgage at $5,000 per month, I couldn't help but smile inwardly at the prospect of moving forward with my plans. I approached the task with a solemn expression, aware of the serious decision I was making. Fortunately, a week-long business trip awaited me starting the next day. Armed with a meticulously packed suitcase and my bank book, I headed for the exit. "Goodbye," I uttered, bidding farewell to the home that had become a source of contention. The first order of business was transferring the house title to Mark. Brimming with excitement about the impending changes, I checked into a hotel and promptly contacted a real estate agent to initiate the house transfer, encompassing the mortgage. The success of the transfer rested on Mark's ability to handle the mortgage. If he couldn't manage it, the options were a lump sum payment or selling the house. Accepting this reality, I directed the agent to find me a new home and office. My work could be conducted remotely, but a dedicated office space was crucial for calm client discussions. The agent identified a suitable location approximately 40 minutes from my previous residence, complete with top-notch security. After a visit and quick decision, I bought the luxurious apartment, considering it a well-deserved reward for my efforts. In the interim period before the move, I stayed in temporary accommodation. Once all the necessary documents were prepared, I delegated the packing and moving process to a professional moving company. During the move, my in-laws and Mark assisted while exchanging unpleasant remarks about me. One of the movers even commented, "You have a difficult family," causing a flush of embarrassment. A week after settling into my new abode, I received a call from Mark. His anxious inquiry about changing the mortgage indicated he was just grasping the situation. His father's shouts in the background urged me to return quickly. Despite the divorce being the plan, Mark seemed taken aback. "But we're getting a divorce, right? It's unfair for me to pay the mortgage if you're the ones living there," he protested. However, I couldn't accept his denial after they had explicitly told me to leave the house. I played back our conversation from that day, caught on tape during a web meeting. Mark was startled by my explanation, having forgotten about my practice of recording meetings for documentation purposes. Undeterred, I informed him about the impending mortgage repayments, subject to a credit check. Mark, seemingly unaware of the details, asked about the monthly amount, leading to my laughter. Despite my prior disclosures and document presentations, Mark seemed oblivious to the $5,000 monthly mortgage. Stunned, he remained speechless, prompting his mother to intervene. She questioned the amount and proceeded to assert that Mark's salary could handle it. Unbeknownst to his parents, Mark hadn't disclosed his actual salary, allowing his mother to confidently declare that they wouldn't assist me any longer. In response, I burst into laughter, provoking her anger. Undeterred, I revealed the actual mortgage amount, $4,000. "What? The mortgage is Mark's monthly salary. That's absurd." My words left her shocked and frozen for a moment, but then she burst into laughter. "That's impossible. Mark has been sending us $4,000 every month. If his salary is really $4,000, he would have been sending us all of it. Stop lying," she exclaimed, refusing to believe me. Remaining calm, I pointed her towards the evidence. "Look at the shelf right by the entrance of the living room. You'll find Mark's salary slips there. If you doubt it, check for yourself." She dismissed my explanation, accusing me of lying, and headed to the indicated shelf. In the background, I could hear Mark trying to stop her. Soon, her voice of surprise came through the phone. "What? There's not even $4,000 here, Mark. What's the meaning of this?" Mark's actual salary turned out to be even lower than I knew, and I could hear his in-laws questioning him in the background. "You might not hear me, but just so you know, the house mortgage is $5,000 a month. Take care," I declared as loudly as possible. Whether they heard me or not, I ended the call. Mark called again several times later, but I ignored them all. "Let's discuss this through a lawyer from now on," I texted him, and then ignored any further communication. The lawyer I hired dealt with frequent contacts in the following days, which soon quieted down. I promptly filed for compensation through my lawyer. After a while, a response came through my lawyer, and I couldn't help but laugh at its contents. It seemed to be co-authored by a team of liars from Mark's side. Their claims were laughable. "The allegations by Shelley are false, and the real victim is our client. We demand compensation for emotional distress," it read. All I could say to my lawyer was, "I'm sorry." The divorce was nearing, but our relationship as a couple was still ongoing. I wanted to get away from a husband who could make such demands. My client wants to meet and discuss in person. It seems Mark doesn't know about this, my lawyer said, handing me a letter. The letter briefly requested to verify the truth behind Mark's claims. I agreed through my lawyer and chose a location far from my current residence for precaution. At the scheduled meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark didn't show up. The lawyer was young and polite, greeting me properly upon arrival. He revealed that his client was actually Mark's mother. According to him, Mark remained silent during their discussions, keeping his head down. His parents kept accusing me, claiming I fabricated fault to demand compensation. As I listened, the lawyer handed me a document detailing the alleged malicious actions. However, my lawyer and I noticed that the document was intentionally crafted to demean me. I explained each point in detail, and the opposing lawyer nodded earnestly, showing understanding. My lawyer presented evidence in line with my explanations. I see the content of your statements is completely different, Jelly. You have solid evidence and a strong case, he commented. Oh, this part is reversed. I pointed out and corrected a mistake. The opposing lawyer was visibly shocked. Once the explanation concluded, he left the room with the same politeness as when he arrived. My lawyer and I strategized to expose Mark and his parents' falsehoods, reaching out to other relevant parties to set up a meeting to discuss compensation. About a month after the meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark and his parents arrived looking haggard. His mother glared at me as if seeing an enemy. You seem to be enjoying all this trouble. Who do you think is responsible for this situation? She asked, dissatisfied with the private dining room I had chosen. It was unfortunate that she didn't like the upscale restaurant she used to favor. However, her irritation might also be influenced by the fact that the opposing lawyer, having learned the truth, dropped their defense. Mother, you used to like this place, right? I anticipated her delight, but she met my words with a somber expression. We entered the restaurant, greeted by staff, briefed on our situation, and escorted to a private room. Mark remained silent until we were seated, then suddenly grew emotional. Shelley, I was wrong. Please help me. I can't go on like this. I'll do anything you say. Please come back, Mark pleaded, stunning his parents. I offered a kind smile, momentarily easing Mark's distress. However, I signaled my lawyer, who handed Mark a document. As Mark paled, I urged him to read it. His mother snatched it, glaring furiously. The document meticulously refuted each of Mark's claims in stark red ink. Enraged, she splashed water on my face, berating me for my arrogance. To everyone's surprise, I burst into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. My laughter caught them off guard, including my lawyer. Yes, it seems I wasn't the perfect wife, I quipped. I shared the burden of household chores, endured criticism for my infertility, and even had my earnings taken. As Mark's parents continued to rail against me, I signaled my lawyer, who produced a photograph. It depicted Mark entering a hotel with a young woman, my former boss and Mark's cousin, Ashley. Shocked into silence, Mark couldn't deny the evidence. Ashley explained the situation, revealing Mark's infidelity. In the face of his guilt, I submitted the divorce papers and compensation documents. Mark, overwhelmed, began to cry. His parents, equally shocked, faced the reality of their son's actions. Within a month, Ashley informed me that Mark and his parents had moved due to financial strain. Mark's salary couldn't sustain their spending habits, and they sought rent assistance. The compensation for the deceived woman and myself was covered by Ashley's parents. Surprisingly, Ashley found love with Mark's former lawyer, drawn to his decisiveness. Embracing the unexpected turn of events, I started blogging about my experiences, leading to new writing opportunities. Since the divorce, I've been pursued by a corporate executive I met through business. Our relationship turned romantic, and he's proposed we live together. While I contemplate my answer, I'm certain of my decision. As I prepare for our date tomorrow, I reflect on the journey that brought me here, seated in front of my computer once again. Now residing with my parents, the realization hit me hard. My marriage, once believed to bring happiness, had only been a facade. My husband, whom I trusted, turned out to be using me, and I felt betrayed by my in-laws, the mother and son duo. Oblivious to their own naivety, seemed oblivious to the practicalities of life. Faced with the threat of being kicked out, I questioned the essence of being a family with such people. The decision was clear. I needed to take charge. Swiftly reaching out to everyone, I initiated preparations for the next chapter of my life. As for the household items, I arranged for a service to pick them up. The following day, furniture and appliances were taken away, prompting a panicked response from my husband. I am Michelle Thompson, a 35-year-old woman who has been working from home since college. Despite a monthly commute, I am a full-time employee thanks to the accommodating nature of my company. A motorcycle accident during my college years left my legs disabled, confining me to a wheelchair. Despite ongoing rehabilitation efforts, the prospect of improvement remained bleak. Embracing my condition, I had initially resigned to the idea of lifelong singleness. However, a blind date arranged by friends reintroduced the desire for companionship. I met Ken, my now husband, who, despite being 5 years my senior, exuded youthful energy. His straightforward demeanor, though bordering on rudeness, intrigued me. Ken's genuine curiosity about my life in a wheelchair set him apart, and I appreciated his unfiltered interest. Despite societal norms, his bold inquiries made me feel seen and understood. As we continued dating, I convinced myself that happiness awaited me with Ken. Blinded by the prospect of a lasting connection, I eagerly accepted his proposal after just 6 months of dating. Immediately after our marriage, things took an unexpected turn. Ken and I decided to move into my standalone house, which, despite being a rental, was relatively pricey but exceptionally wheelchair-friendly. It seemed the previous tenant had made the place more accessible, and Ken appreciated the spaciousness. Since I spent a lot of time at home, I naturally took on most of the housework. Occasionally, when I asked Ken for help, he would dismissively claim exhaustion, refusing to lift a finger or assist me in the bath. Despite managing on my own, bathing took longer, and I reminisced about the days when a caregiver visited twice a week to help. Frustrations mounted as Ken neglected to put away bath items, making the process even more time-consuming. Pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears, as Ken failed to recognize the house's design catered to my needs. It became evident that Ken's initial attraction had been to the house, appliances, and my ability to handle chores despite my disability. His unemployment and nightly partying further strained our relationship. While the realization was heart-wrenching, I clung to the notion that our marriage must have some love to it. Financial issues crept in, with Ken increasingly relying on me for money. Seeking advice from his mother only brought biased support, leaving me feeling lost without any family to turn to. Friends dismissed my concerns, emphasizing Ken's facade. Ken's unpredictable behavior, fueled by alcohol, pushed me to my limits. I grappled with the dilemma of enduring the situation or facing a solitary future. Just as the idea of divorce started to gain prominence, Ken unexpectedly proposed living with his parents. Stunned, I learned he intended for them to move into our place. While I understood the desire to be near aging parents, their good health made the proposition perplexing. I couldn't comprehend why Ken's parents were considering moving from their own home to ours. Did they genuinely need to stay here? With 4 people in the house, it would be cramped, and given that I work from home, it would be quite inconvenient. "You're always thinking about yourself, huh? I never thought you were this selfish," Ken accused. "I'm just questioning why they need to move here when they have their own place. Our home is more spacious, modern, and equipped with all the conveniences. Besides, it's designed to be accessible for elders. If Ken's parents move in, I'd have to be on my toes during work hours. While Ken is rarely home, his retired parents would likely be around a lot. Sharing the bathroom and kitchen? I'm slower than most people, and I can foresee the challenges of such a living situation. Can I have some time to think?" "You better hurry up. We don't have much time, Ken retorted. Despite his claim of limited time, Ken wasted no time. By the weekend, he brought his parents over, making me suspect they had been planning this move for a while. You know, I've been thinking. Maybe you should consider a facility, Ken's mother suggested. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A facility for me? Yeah, it's a good idea, right? You have your own limits. In a facility, they take care of everything. It became apparent that Ken wasn't just contemplating his parents moving in. He was also considering sending me away. I'd visit you from time to time. That statement jolted me awake. If not now, then when, Ken? What am I to you? Your wife, right? Would you really tell your beloved wife to go to a facility? Hold on. When did I say I love you, Michelle? Ken's words flushed my face with anger. This guy, Ken, was using me. Wasn't it my fault for letting it get to this point? I thought I had to draw a line. Then, even more shocking words came out of Ken's mouth. In this house, I'm going to live with my parents. You, an outsider, can go live in some cheap facility. What'd you just say? I looked to his parents, hoping for support, but they just had eerie grins on their faces. Why are you laughing? What's the big deal, huh? Were they targeting my home even before our marriage? Things have been escalating too fast lately. I need to evict these people. Please leave. What? Leave now? How can you talk to my parents like that? I felt like I saw the real Ken. He was yelling at me with such fury. If he cares so much for his parents, why doesn't he earn his own money and build them a house? Why does he have to take mine? My head felt like it was on fire. It's okay, Ken. Michelle must have been shocked since we came unexpectedly, his mother said. We just came to check the place today. Yeah, we need to check before moving in. Looks like there are more appliances than last time. Seems comfy to live in. They were genuinely here to take over my home. In an attempt to steady my nerves, I took a deep breath, inhaling oxygen. A sudden question lingered in my mind. If I leave, how are they planning to sustain themselves? His parents rely on a pension, and Ken is just a part-timer. I'm covering all the rent and living expenses. Who's going to handle the $2,800 monthly payment? Do his parents assume Ken is covering the living expenses? Disregarding my concerns, his parents cheerfully departed, with Ken following suit. I'm going to stay at my parents' tonight. Hold on, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I, the man of the house, have decided. I won't change my mind. Left alone in shock, I couldn't linger in that state. I promptly contacted a real estate agent I knew. When Ken returned the next day, he saw the organized belongings and chuckled. Oh, started packing. Found a place to move to already? Yes, I have. Ken appeared genuinely surprised by my swift response. And here's the card of a divorce lawyer. Here you go, Ken. From now on, let's communicate through the lawyer. A divorce? Why? If you're kicking me out, there's no point in being married anymore, right? Ken looked as if he had been hit by a ton of bricks. He hadn't anticipated my swift mention of divorce. You can't live without me, right? I don't understand what you mean. Who else would marry you? I can live on my own, but you said you wanted to get married. It was at this moment that I realized how arrogant and overconfident Ken had been. He approached me assuming I was a lonely, disabled single woman. I'm independent, have money, and never struggle with my living. Plus, I stay home all the time, so I handle all the chores for him. I'm the ideal woman. Money keeps coming in even if he doesn't work. He thought I wouldn't leave because I couldn't find anyone else. That's why he was shocked when I casually brought up divorce. Why? You know, if you divorce me, you might be single for the rest of your life. Well, if it means living a married life with you, I'd rather be single forever. Whether I spend the rest of my life alone isn't for you to decide. The typically submissive me was now fighting back, and he was getting flustered. I could tell that Ken was panicking. I never thought he was such a weak man. I don't know why I had been putting up with him for so long. Once I decided on the divorce, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I guess I had been too focused on getting married. Anyway, You don't have to move out right away. I didn't mean to rush you into a facility that soon. Oh, it's fine. I'll do as you wish. Don't worry. You won't find a place that fast. Think it over, okay? I've already secured a place, so it's all right. What? Wait a minute. Isn't this too soon? Observing Ken's shifting attitudes, from smugness to panic, only heightened my irritation. Calmly, I explained, the facility staff are informed and know about my situation, so everything's fine. Wait, when did you even set all this up? Were you preparing all along? Ken questioned. Yes, even before I met you. In fact, I had been considering my retirement and had an eye on a particular facility, more like a condo. After an injury during my hospital stay, I delved into various investment books, diversifying my investments between my salary and my parents' inheritance. The facility I had my eye on, I had already purchased and had been renting it out for income. I never mentioned this to Ken. It's my hidden asset. We don't need to get a divorce. I get it. You can stay here. Let's live with my parents. Do you not get it? Why would I ever do that? He seemed pretty dense. Even after bringing up divorce, he still believed he was the only one for me. Sorry, but my mind's made up. What's your problem? You're so selfish. If you come crying back later, it's not my problem. I won't be, so don't worry. Ken fell silent, deep in thought, for what seemed like hours. During that time, I started packing up my things. Then I heard Ken making a phone call, likely talking to his parents. It seemed pathetic, relying on them for such decisions. Eventually, Ken approached me. Fine, we'll get a divorce. Just leave quickly. Ken said begrudgingly, perhaps realizing he might miss having me around like a housemaid. But he probably thought that living with his parents would save him from household chores. He has a house, and it's fully furnished. No issues for daily life, at least for now. With that thought, he headed back to his parents' home. I'm going to talk to my folks about what's next. Get ready to move out quickly. Yes, I'll do that. I finished moving all my stuff within a week, and during that time, Ken never showed up. We met again a day after the move was done, as I was trying to start my new life in my new house. Ken called me outside and said, "Hey, what's going on? This place is almost empty. Where are the appliances?" I had a service pick up those items for me. I called the service the next day and had them collect all the furniture and appliances. My husband became agitated and started grumbling. Not only Ken, but also his parents were there. All the appliances here were bought by me. They are all from when I was single. The only thing that's yours is right there. There were only 3 cardboard boxes. I did leave the clear clothing container we bought after marriage. Michelle, we can't live with this. We need to split the property if we're divorcing. That's right. We can't live here like this. What are you talking about? Nobody can live here. What do you mean? The rent's $2,000? Ken and his parents were stunned. I told Ken when we got married, this isn't your own house. No, it isn't. I got a bit of a discount on the rent because I asked a real estate agent I know. If I move out, the rent will go up even more, given that this is a property with disability access, and I've already received several inquiries from people with the same concerns. I recommended that they move out. Why didn't you tell us sooner? What are we going to do now? Ken's mother was notably agitated. I don't know. I did tell Ken. I didn't hear about it. I'll sue you. Ken threatened. I saw that coming. Honestly, from an outsider's perspective, it might look like I selfishly got a divorce, broke the lease, and took all the furniture and appliances. But I was sure you can sue. But do you even have the money for it? Ken's face twisted. He couldn't afford a lawyer, even if by some miracle he could. I have an ace up my sleeve. I showed them some pictures. When did you take these? The pictures showed Ken gambling and womanizing. I spent my money on this. I'm ready to use these in court, Ken. What the hell? I thought everything was going well. His parents were particularly agitated. What's going on? Then suddenly, Ken started to apologize. I'm sorry. Please come back. I need you, Michelle. You're the one who kicked me out. We're already divorced. So what are you talking about? Besides, you don't love me, do you? If that's the case, I'll just leave then. This time, even Ken's parents began to apologize next to him. We don't have a place to live anymore. That was a shock. What do you mean? Our house got foreclosed on. Turns out Ken's family home will be repossessed in a few weeks. They've gone bankrupt. The debt that his father accumulated grew like a snowball and became an amount that's impossible for retirees to pay. Ken, who used to receive an allowance from his parents when he was single, probably thought he was in trouble and decided to get married, hoping for support. Now I understand why his mother was so kind before we got married. I can't help you now. We're strangers. Even if my folks and I end up homeless, are you okay with that? You brought it on yourself, didn't you? Ken's ulterior motive was clear as day. I firmly told him I had no intention of giving him even one piece of furniture or electronics. Please don't say that. Have some mercy. It's too late for apologies. Now sort it out on your own. That's why I'm asking. I can't sort it out. I told Ken and his father, who were so persistent, that if they couldn't pay the rent, they should move out. The place is in my name, so if I cancel the lease, that's the end of it. Evicting them was easy. In the end, even if the lease was transferred, Ken probably couldn't afford to live here. I heard all of this from the real estate agent. I can't pay the rent. In the end, I decided to cancel the lease here. I no longer need this place, and since the divorce is final, everything is over. I somehow kicked out the stunned family of 3 and locked the door. What are we going to do now? I can move into a facility. Goodbye. Facilities like that probably have no freedom and are the worst, right? Good luck in that crappy environment. Maybe Ken felt unsatisfied, not having the last word because he spat out those bitter words. I ignored Ken and his parents and left the scene. But Ken wasn't going to stay put. A few days later, he showed up at the facility where I had moved. Hey, what's this about? Looking at the facility where I was, Ken looked like he was about to faint. It's not a crappy environment at all. It's a luxury facility worth $1 million. I had saved up money, and with the earnings from my investments, I bought this place. The previous occupant had left at the perfect time, so I was able to move in immediately. With the sale of my house and some extra income, I still had plenty left over. This facility is top-notch, with doctors and helpers on site. The floor plan is just like an apartment, with plenty of privacy. The room is a 3-bedroom, so families can live together. There are even couples and families living here. I can call a helper with the push of a button, and there's assisted bathing every day. I originally thought of this as my final residence, but I'm glad I made the move. You had this much money then? Why? I really don't want you coming all the way here. We're strangers now. Please leave. Then Ken suddenly started acting all sweet toward me. Honestly, it's creepy. Can't you just let me live here? What are you talking about? That's impossible. We're divorced. Face reality. That's why. Let's get remarried. I'm living in a motel now. Isn't that pitiful? I can't get a job because I don't have an address at the motel. He's such a smooth talker. He seems to have quickly abandoned his own parents. In the end, he only thinks about himself. Why don't you take a look in the mirror? You look pathetic, living off your parents at your age, becoming a freeloader after marriage, and now begging on the streets. Ken's face turned bright red. You're not ashamed to be clinging to your ex-wife. Look, everyone's watching, aren't they? Residents peeking from their balconies were watching. Actually, I had asked them in advance to look out if my ex-husband came to visit. I thought Ken would surely come looking for me at least once, either to gloat over my miserable state in the facility or to beg. The residents were very cooperative. They purposely looked at Ken with pity. It's like a real-life drama. I want to applaud them. Ken finally noticed the stares and seemed to realize how embarrassing he was being. I won't ask anymore. With a pale face, he muttered those words and disappeared. I don't think he'll come here anymore. Later, when I went out, I ran into my mother-in-law working at a supermarket checkout. My father-in-law was a janitor, and my mother-in-law was a cashier. As soon as my mother-in-law spotted me, she turned her face and tried to hide. She was being scolded by a young employee for her attitude. Ken was apparently introduced to a job by someone he met at the motel cafe and was being exploited at a very low-paying job site. I frequently host home parties and live happily every day with people from the same facility. I also became good friends with other wheelchair users. If I had known such a community existed, I would have moved here sooner. I found the time to attend physical therapy sessions. My current goal is to get my legs moving on my own. I lead a fulfilling life both at work and in private.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa. I'm 29 years old and currently living in Atlanta, Georgia, though I'm planning to move soon. Recently, I ended a difficult year-and-a-half-long marriage. It was a challenging time, but with my father's support and the intervention of the police, I managed to get through it. Looking back, I realize I should have been more cautious before accepting the proposal. I've always been shy and reserved, finding comfort in solitude. Most of my time is spent on my computer, immersed in the digital world. Occasionally, I'll visit a pub for a drink, but I'm uneasy around strangers and hesitant to form new friendships out of concern for my safety. My life changed significantly when I was 7. My mother passed away from an untreated heart condition, and from that moment on, my father, a mariner since his mid-20s, raised me. His job kept him away for long stretches, but he always stayed in touch through calls and letters. When my mother died, he returned home to comfort me. I still remember clinging to him at her funeral as he reassured me, "It's okay now, my little girl, Daddy's here." That night, I saw him cry on the couch, whispering to himself before burying his face in a cushion. It was only the second time I'd seen him cry. The first was when I was injured as a child, feeling responsible for our situation. He took 3 months off from sailing to care for me. Before his next voyage, he left me in my grandmother's care, encouraging me to help her and promising to return soon. Those early years of loss and resilience shaped me. I spent most of my time indoors, helping my grandmother and finding solace in books and, later, the internet. By the time I started college, my father sent me back to our old house. Adjusting was hard. I disliked campus life and struggled to connect with others in person. But online, I found confidence. The internet became my refuge, a place where I could express myself freely. I made friends from around the world, each with unique stories that showed me how interconnected we all are. It was here I met Steven, a content creator. We started chatting and eventually progressed to video calls. To keep my anonymity, I wore a Batman mask, and he covered his face with a scarf and beanie. "Hi Lisa, it's great to finally see you," Steven greeted during one of our calls. "Hello Steven, nice to meet you, virtually," I replied. "How are you feeling today? Have you chatted with many people?" he asked. "I'm okay, just a bit nervous," I admitted. "That's normal, don't worry, I'm just as awkward as you," he reassured me with a smile. As we talked, we discovered shared interests and exchanged stories. The connection felt natural, and I began to feel at ease. "Thanks for making this so effortless," I said. "The feeling's mutual. Lisa, you're great to talk to. Let's chat again sometime. I'm usually online playing Mario," he joked. Our conversations deepened over time, and though we only knew each other online, we formed a meaningful bond. Meanwhile, my father remained cautious about my online activities. Over dinner recently, he asked about my plans. "So, how are your studies, Dove?" he asked. "I've graduated, Dad," I replied, a hint of sharpness in my voice. "You wouldn't know, you weren't there." He sighed, looking regretful. "Oh, Lisa, I'm sorry, I know I missed a lot. I even emailed you saying I'd be there for your birthday." "Tomorrow's my pumpkin's birthday," he exclaimed, trying to lighten the mood. "Stop calling me names, Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. To me, you'll always be my little dove." "But seriously, what are your plans? Are you thinking of working?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "What do you mean you're not sure? What are your friends up to these days?" His questions made me reflect on where my life is heading. While I'm uncertain about the future, I know that both the digital and real-world experiences have shaped me. For now, I'll take one step at a time, guided by the lessons I've learned along the way. I don't have any friends, Dad, I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. My dad sighed deeply. Lisa, I didn't send you to live with your mom's family just so you could stay cooped up inside all day. There's a whole world out there, so many people you'll never meet if you don't step outside. That's the problem, I said, exasperated. I don't know how to. This exchange exposed the gulf between us, his world of tangible connections and mine, rooted in the digital realm. Still, I relented. I'll try, okay? I do have friends, but they're all online. Online friends? Dad shook his head, disappointment creeping into his voice. That's not how real friendships work, Lisa. I sighed, the weight of his disapproval pressing down on me. Fine, how about this, we go out today, just you and me, shopping or something? That sounds like a start, he said, his tone softening. You've got to push yourself, Lisa, this isn't living. I know it's been hard since Janice. Why are you bringing Mom into this? I snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. What are you trying to say? I'm saying we've both been stuck in the past, he said gently, though his words stung. We loved her, but we have to find a way forward, Lisa. His well-meaning words ignited something in me. I slammed my hands on the table, the clatter echoing in the room. You don't understand me, I spat, standing abruptly. Lisa, please, I'm trying to help you, Dad pleaded, his voice tinged with frustration and hurt. You don't know everything about me, so stop pretending you do, I shouted before storming off, my emotions in turmoil. I retreated to my sanctuary, my room, my computer, and the reassuring presence of Stephen on the other end of the screen. Stephen, you won't believe the argument I just had with my dad, I vented. Tell me what happened, he replied, his voice calm and understanding. I poured out my frustrations, the sense of being misunderstood, my dad's inability to grasp why I found solace online. Stephen listened patiently, never judging. Hey, he said after a moment, would you want to meet up sometime? We're both introverts, so it doesn't have to be anything big, just a quiet place where we can talk. His suggestion startled me. I'm not sure, it feels so sudden, I'd need time to think about it, I said, my voice hesitant. Take all the time you need, Stephen replied warmly. Whenever you're ready, you know where to find me. Here's my address. Why are you so kind to me? We're just strangers, I asked, confused by his unwavering support. Because I like you, Lisa, he admitted simply. You, like me? My voice wavered with disbelief. Yeah, he said softly, I'd like to get to know you better, and if you ever feel the same, I'm here. Meeting Stephen felt like a leap into the unknown, but one I knew I needed to take. Standing outside his house for the first time, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. After a month of chatting online, I was about to step beyond the screen into a new chapter of my life. I was about to meet Stephen in person for the first time. Surprisingly, he lived just a 15-minute drive away. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves, I knocked on the weathered wooden door. It creaked open, revealing Stephen's warm smile, which immediately put me at ease. Welcome to my humble abode, your presence graces my domain, fair master, he joked, adding a playful touch of gamer lingo. I laughed softly, some of that gaming talk might go over my head, but thank you, this place is cozy. Do you live here alone? I asked, glancing around at the neatly arranged space. Nope, fair princess, he replied with a grin. I live with my mom, she has the ground floor, and I've got the top floor all to myself. Come on, I'll give you the grand tour. Stephen's home wasn't extravagant, but it was charming and full of personality. Shelves lined with well-thumbed classics, a stack of board games, and a perfectly arranged computer setup painted a picture of someone genuine and thoughtful. His quirks, evident in every corner, made the space feel uniquely his. We spent the afternoon talking and laughing, discovering shared interests that deepened our connection beyond the digital realm. Meeting in person added a layer of closeness I hadn't anticipated. He was as kind and witty as he'd been online, and his easy humor made me feel at ease. As the sun began to set, Stephen suggested a walk in the nearby park. The cool breeze accompanied our conversation, which flowed seamlessly, dissolving any lingering nervousness. Wait, you didn't celebrate your birthday? He asked, surprised, during a lull in our talk. No, I admitted quietly, I didn't feel like it, especially after the argument with my dad. Stephen gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry to hear that, I'm sure he'll come around, he's your dad, after all. At first, his words seemed kind, soothing even, but over time, I realized there was an edge to his concern. What began as a blossoming relationship turned into something suffocating. As we started dating, Steven's affection grew possessive. He wanted me constantly available, either talking to him on the phone or online. If I chatted with anyone else, he'd get angry, cloaking his jealousy with statements like, "I just want to protect you." I believed him. Why did I believe him? His mother's disapproval only made things worse. Though she'd never met me, she dismissed me outright. The strain of knowing she didn't approve was compounded by Steven's constant defense of her. "Not every parent is perfect. Just look at your dad," he'd say. "At least my mom cares about me." "That hurts, Steven," I'd reply, trying to make him see the damage his words caused. "But you know I'm the one who loves you, right? Your dad doesn't love you like I do. Stop complaining about your life and try to compromise," he'd add, his tone more commanding than caring. When he suggested a secret wedding, I was too worn down to resist. Steven convinced me that my dad wouldn't approve and didn't truly care about me. Blinded by what I thought was love, I went along with it, believing his assurances over my own instincts. Looking back, I wonder how I let it get so far. Each step I took closer to Steven, I seemed to lose more of myself. I reluctantly agreed to marry him in a quiet, somber ceremony. Deep down, I knew it was a risk, but I felt trapped by my circumstances. You might think I was weak, but the weight of my upbringing and insecurities had shaped me, leaving me unsure of how to stand up for myself. I often blamed my inability to fight back on my own failings. In the months that followed, I began to see a side of his mother I hadn't anticipated, a side filled with cruelty and malice. Her every action seemed designed to make me miserable. It started with subtle, cutting remarks and escalated into relentless emotional torment. "Is this supposed to be food? My son can't eat this mess. Make it again, you fool," she'd sneer. "Why is this place so filthy? Are you blind?" Her harsh words chipped away at my self-esteem until I felt utterly worthless. Steven, meanwhile, was a passive observer, locked away in his room with his video games and music. His detachment left me isolated, bearing the brunt of his mother's venom alone. I missed my dad terribly and regretted every fight we'd ever had. It was my anger that had driven him away, and now I had no one to turn to. One day, feeling feverish, I lay down on the couch, hoping for a brief reprieve. Just as I was beginning to drift off, a sudden splash of icy water shocked me awake. Margaret stood over me, her face twisted with disdain. "What the hell are you doing on our couch? Did you get the groceries like I told you?" she barked. Too weak to argue, I didn't reply. "I see, you expect me to do all the work while you laze around? You devil," she spat, slapping me hard across the face before calling for Steven. That was my breaking point. "I'm done," I shouted. "I won't be your punching bag anymore. Find someone else to torment because I'm leaving." But as I turned to go, something heavy struck the back of my head, and the world went dark. When I came to, I found myself in a dimly lit room. My head throbbed as I struggled to sit up. Where was I? The sound of approaching footsteps sent a chill down my spine. Crawling toward the noise, I reached a metal door with a small window. It creaked open, and there was Steven, grinning cruelly. "Is my wife afraid of the dark?" he mocked. "Steven, please let me out. This isn't funny," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Shut up. This is what you get for disrespecting my mother. Maybe you'll learn to behave down here," he sneered. Desperation consumed me as he slammed the window shut, plunging me into darkness. Alone in the cold, I felt fear give way to anger. How had my life come to this? I reached into my pocket and felt the shattered remains of my phone. To my astonishment, the screen still flickered faintly. Trembling, I dialed the only person who might still care, my father. 3 agonizing days later, hope arrived in the form of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I heard firm footsteps approach the house. The door burst open, and there he was, my father. His presence was a beacon of strength and relief. He didn't come alone. The police followed him, storming into the house to confront Steven and Margaret. Their protests were feeble, their lies transparent. "What have you done to my daughter, you monsters?" my father bellowed. "I was going to let her go, I swear," Steven stammered, but his words fell on deaf ears. My father turned to him, his voice filled with disgust. "You're nothing but a coward. You will pay for what you've done." As I stepped out of that dark basement and into the sunlight, I felt a surge of determination. This ordeal had tested me, but it also revealed my strength and the power of unwavering love. I decided to leave Georgia and start anew in California with my dad. I vowed never to let anyone silence me again and to be more cautious in trusting others. The scars of this experience would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of my resilience and the promise of a brighter future ahead. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa. I'm 29 years old and currently living in Atlanta, Georgia, though I'm planning to move soon. Recently, I ended a difficult year-and-a-half-long marriage. It was a challenging time, but with my father's support and the intervention of the police, I managed to get through it. Looking back, I realize I should have been more cautious before accepting the proposal. I've always been shy and reserved, finding comfort in solitude. Most of my time is spent on my computer, immersed in the digital world. Occasionally, I'll visit a pub for a drink, but I'm uneasy around strangers and hesitant to form new friendships out of concern for my safety. My life changed significantly when I was 7. My mother passed away from an untreated heart condition, and from that moment on, my father, a mariner since his mid-20s, raised me. His job kept him away for long stretches, but he always stayed in touch through calls and letters. When my mother died, he returned home to comfort me. I still remember clinging to him at her funeral as he reassured me, "It's okay now, my little girl, Daddy's here." That night, I saw him cry on the couch, whispering to himself before burying his face in a cushion. It was only the second time I'd seen him cry. The first was when I was injured as a child, feeling responsible for our situation. He took 3 months off from sailing to care for me. Before his next voyage, he left me in my grandmother's care, encouraging me to help her and promising to return soon. Those early years of loss and resilience shaped me. I spent most of my time indoors, helping my grandmother and finding solace in books and, later, the internet. By the time I started college, my father sent me back to our old house. Adjusting was hard. I disliked campus life and struggled to connect with others in person, but online, I found confidence. The internet became my refuge, a place where I could express myself freely. I made friends from around the world, each with unique stories that showed me how interconnected we all are. It was here I met Steven, a content creator. We started chatting and eventually progressed to video calls. To keep my anonymity, I wore a Batman mask, and he covered his face with a scarf and beanie. "Hi Lisa, it's great to finally see you," Steven greeted during one of our calls. "Hello Steven, nice to meet you, virtually," I replied. "How are you feeling today? Have you chatted with many people?" he asked. "I'm okay, just a bit nervous," I admitted. "That's normal, don't worry, I'm just as awkward as you," he reassured me with a smile. As we talked, we discovered shared interests and exchanged stories. The connection felt natural, and I began to feel at ease. "Thanks for making this so effortless," I said. "The feeling's mutual. Lisa, you're great to talk to. Let's chat again sometime. I'm usually online playing Mario," he joked. Our conversations deepened over time, and though we only knew each other online, we formed a meaningful bond. Meanwhile, my father remained cautious about my online activities. Over dinner recently, he asked about my plans. "So, how are your studies, Dove?" he asked. "I've graduated, Dad," I replied, a hint of sharpness in my voice. "You wouldn't know, you weren't there." He sighed, looking regretful. "Oh, Lisa, I'm sorry, I know I missed a lot. I even emailed you saying I'd be there for your birthday." "Tomorrow's my pumpkin's birthday," he exclaimed, trying to lighten the mood. "Stop calling me names, Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. To me, you'll always be my little dove. But seriously, what are your plans? Are you thinking of working?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "What do you mean you're not sure? What are your friends up to these days?" His questions made me reflect on where my life is heading. While I'm uncertain about the future, I know that both the digital and real-world experiences have shaped me. For now, I'll take one step at a time, guided by the lessons I've learned along the way. "I don't have any friends, Dad," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. My dad sighed deeply. "Lisa, I didn't send you to live with your mom's family just so you could stay cooped up inside all day. There's a whole world out there. So many people you'll never meet if you don't step outside." "That's the problem," I said, exasperated. "I don't know how to." This exchange exposed the gulf between us, his world of tangible connections and mine, rooted in the digital realm. Still, I relented. I'll try, okay? I do have friends, but they're all online. Online friends? Dad shook his head, disappointment creeping into his voice. That's not how real friendships work, Lisa. I sighed, the weight of his disapproval pressing down on me. Fine, how about this, we go out today, just you and me, shopping or something? That sounds like a start, he said, his tone softening. You've got to push yourself. Lisa, this isn't living. I know it's been hard since Janice. Why are you bringing Mom into this? I snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. What are you trying to say? I'm saying we've both been stuck in the past, he said gently, though his words stung. We loved her, but we have to find a way forward, Lisa. His well-meaning words ignited something in me. I slammed my hands on the table, the clatter echoing in the room. You don't understand me, I spat, standing abruptly. Lisa, please, I'm trying to help you, Dad pleaded, his voice tinged with frustration and hurt. You don't know everything about me, so stop pretending you do, I shouted before storming off, my emotions in turmoil. I retreated to my sanctuary, my room, my computer, and the reassuring presence of Stephen on the other end of the screen. Stephen, you won't believe the argument I just had with my dad, I vented. Tell me what happened, he replied, his voice calm and understanding. I poured out my frustrations, the sense of being misunderstood, my dad's inability to grasp why I found solace online. Stephen listened patiently, never judging. Hey, he said after a moment, would you want to meet up sometime? We're both introverts, so it doesn't have to be anything big, just a quiet place where we can talk. His suggestion startled me. I'm not sure, it feels so sudden, I'd need time to think about it, I said, my voice hesitant. Take all the time you need, Stephen replied warmly, whenever you're ready, you know where to find me, here's my address. Why are you so kind to me, we're just strangers, I asked, confused by his unwavering support. Because I like you, Lisa, he admitted simply. You, like me? My voice wavered with disbelief. Yeah, he said softly, I'd like to get to know you better, and if you ever feel the same, I'm here. Meeting Stephen felt like a leap into the unknown, but one I knew I needed to take. Standing outside his house for the first time, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. After a month of chatting online, I was about to step beyond the screen into a new chapter of my life. I was about to meet Stephen in person for the first time. Surprisingly, he lived just a 15-minute drive away. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves, I knocked on the weathered wooden door. It creaked open, revealing Stephen's warm smile, which immediately put me at ease. Welcome to my humble abode, your presence graces my domain, fair master, he joked, adding a playful touch of gamer lingo. I laughed softly. Some of that gaming talk might go over my head, but thank you. This place is cozy. Do you live here alone? I asked, glancing around at the neatly arranged space. Nope, fair princess, he replied with a grin. I live with my mom. She has the ground floor, and I've got the top floor all to myself. Come on, I'll give you the grand tour. Stephen's home wasn't extravagant, but it was charming and full of personality. Shelves lined with well-thumbed classics, a stack of board games, and a perfectly arranged computer setup painted a picture of someone genuine and thoughtful. His quirks, evident in every corner, made the space feel uniquely his. We spent the afternoon talking and laughing, discovering shared interests that deepened our connection beyond the digital realm. Meeting in person added a layer of closeness I hadn't anticipated. He was as kind and witty as he'd been online, and his easy humor made me feel at ease. As the sun began to set, Stephen suggested a walk in the nearby park. The cool breeze accompanied our conversation, which flowed seamlessly, dissolving any lingering nervousness. Wait, you didn't celebrate your birthday? He asked, surprised, during a lull in our talk. No, I admitted quietly, I didn't feel like it, especially after the argument with my dad. Stephen gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure he'll come around, he's your dad, after all. At first, his words seemed kind, soothing even, but over time, I realized there was an edge to his concern. What began as a blossoming relationship turned into something suffocating. As we started dating, Stephen's affection grew possessive. He wanted me constantly available, either talking to him on the phone or online. If I chatted with anyone else, he'd get angry, cloaking his jealousy with statements like, I just want to protect you. I believed him. Why did I believe him? His mother's disapproval only made things worse. Though she'd never met me, she dismissed me outright. The strain of knowing she didn't approve was compounded by Stephen's constant defense of her. "Not every parent is perfect. Just look at your dad," he'd say. "At least my mom cares about me." "That hurts, Stephen," I'd reply, trying to make him see the damage his words caused. "But you know I'm the one who loves you, right? Your dad doesn't love you like I do. Stop complaining about your life and try to compromise," he'd add, his tone more commanding than caring. When he suggested a secret wedding, I was too worn down to resist. Stephen convinced me that my dad wouldn't approve and didn't truly care about me. Blinded by what I thought was love, I went along with it, believing his assurances over my own instincts. Looking back, I wonder how I let it get so far. Each step I took closer to Stephen, I seemed to lose more of myself. I reluctantly agreed to marry him in a quiet, somber ceremony. Deep down, I knew it was a risk, but I felt trapped by my circumstances. You might think I was weak, but the weight of my upbringing and insecurities had shaped me, leaving me unsure of how to stand up for myself. I often blamed my inability to fight back on my own failings. In the months that followed, I began to see a side of his mother I hadn't anticipated, a side filled with cruelty and malice. Her every action seemed designed to make me miserable. It started with subtle, cutting remarks and escalated into relentless emotional torment. "Is this supposed to be food? My son can't eat this mess. Make it again, you fool," she'd sneer. "Why is this place so filthy? Are you blind?" Her harsh words chipped away at my self-esteem until I felt utterly worthless. Stephen, meanwhile, was a passive observer, locked away in his room with his video games and music. His detachment left me isolated, bearing the brunt of his mother's venom alone. I missed my dad terribly and regretted every fight we'd ever had. It was my anger that had driven him away, and now I had no one to turn to. One day, feeling feverish, I lay down on the couch, hoping for a brief reprieve. Just as I was beginning to drift off, a sudden splash of icy water shocked me awake. Margaret stood over me, her face twisted with disdain. "What the hell are you doing on our couch? Did you get the groceries like I told you?" she barked. Too weak to argue, I didn't reply. "I see, you expect me to do all the work while you laze around? You devil," she spat, slapping me hard across the face before calling for Stephen. That was my breaking point. "I'm done," I shouted. "I won't be your punching bag anymore. Find someone else to torment because I'm leaving." But as I turned to go, something heavy struck the back of my head, and the world went dark. When I came to, I found myself in a dimly lit room. My head throbbed as I struggled to sit up. Where was I? The sound of approaching footsteps sent a chill down my spine. Crawling toward the noise, I reached a metal door with a small window. It creaked open, and there was Stephen, grinning cruelly. "Is my wife afraid of the dark?" he mocked. "Stephen, please let me out. This isn't funny," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Shut up. This is what you get for disrespecting my mother. Maybe you'll learn to behave down here," he sneered. Desperation consumed me as he slammed the window shut, plunging me into darkness. Alone in the cold, I felt fear give way to anger. How had my life come to this? I reached into my pocket and felt the shattered remains of my phone. To my astonishment, the screen still flickered faintly. Trembling, I dialed the only person who might still care, my father. 3 agonizing days later, hope arrived in the form of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I heard firm footsteps approach the house. The door burst open, and there he was, my father. His presence was a beacon of strength and relief. He didn't come alone. The police followed him, storming into the house to confront Stephen and Margaret. Their protests were feeble, their lies transparent. "What have you done to my daughter, you monsters?" my father bellowed. "I was going to let her go, I swear," Stephen stammered, but his words fell on deaf ears. My father turned to him, his voice filled with disgust. "You're nothing but a coward. You will pay for what you've done." As I stepped out of that dark basement and into the sunlight, I felt a surge of determination. This ordeal had tested me, but it also revealed my strength and the power of unwavering love. I decided to leave Georgia and start anew in California with my dad. I vowed never to let anyone silence me again and to be more cautious in trusting others. The scars of this experience would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of my resilience and the promise of a brighter future ahead.
My dinner still isn't ready. If you're not going to take care of the housework, we're getting a divorce. I wonder who he thinks makes it possible for him to have meals. Fine, if that's how you feel, maybe we should get a divorce. What? I've had enough of this marriage and want to leave this house. Can you help me? Why should I? We're no longer connected, right? I'm Karen, a 34-year-old office worker. It's been a year since I married Shane. While many enjoy the bliss of newlywed life, my experience has been far from that. Honestly, our relationship has been strained. The root of the issue lies in his behavior. I overlooked it before marriage, but now I see that he's a classic domineering husband, overly controlling. Hey, where's the food? When will it be ready? I just got home. If you came home earlier, you could have made something yourself. What are you talking about? Don't you see I've been working hard and just got home? I was at work too. Your job can't be that important. I probably make more than you do. Bragging about your earnings. You're really narrow-minded. I hold a significant position at my company. I'll be earning more than you soon enough. Well, I hope that's true. Are you dubbing me? How dare you question me like that? My husband reacts defensively to every word I say, trying to exert control. I'm going to set a curfew for you. A curfew? I was taken aback by his sudden declaration. We're not children. I'm serious. Be home by 7:00 p.m. Don't say such ridiculous things. I might be working late because of overtime. No matter how much I protested, my husband remained unyielding. Be quiet. I'm serious. You need to follow this rule. A promise should be made with mutual agreement. What my husband was imposing was nothing but coercion, a blatant threat. A few days later, after coming home past 8:00 p.m. due to work, I was met with an unbelievable situation. What? What do you mean? As I tried to unlock the front door, I realized the chain was on. Panicking, I pressed the intercom. Yes? I heard my husband's voice through the intercom. What's going on here? What do you mean? We agreed on a curfew of 7:00 p.m., didn't we? Huh? You were serious about that? Of course I was serious. I told him that while he speaks with such confidence, his behavior is just childish. I really want him to stop. Stop the nonsense and just open the door. No way. You always get so full of yourself. Full of myself? What are you talking about? I'm saying you act so arrogant when you think you have the upper hand. In the end, my husband really refused to let me into the house. I was deeply unsettled by his drastic change, wondering how he could have become so different from the man I once knew. We had first met at a social mixer. At that time, he was a successful businessman working for a top company, and he was very intent on winning me over. With his career and finances stable, I was drawn to his advances. He was always polite and respectful, and that didn't change when we started dating. I believe he was a kind and wonderful man, and I was truly happy when he proposed. Karen, I vow to make you happy with these hands of mine. Trust me, and let's build a future together. Yes, thank you. I look forward to supporting each other. I had believed that marrying him would surely lead to happiness, but once we were married, it was far from what I had imagined. My husband turned out to be selfish, arrogant, and prone to verbal abuse. To make matters worse, about 6 months after our marriage, he abruptly quit his job. You quit your job? Why? That company wasn't worth it. They didn't appreciate my talents. Why should a junior be promoted over me? It's absurd. He left his job on a whim, frustrated by his lack of promotion. It was a shocking turn of events. I had respected him as a confident professional working at a prestigious company, and I had tolerated his verbal abuse as a result. But now, my once elite husband was suddenly unemployed. He went to numerous job interviews afterward, but none resulted in an offer. Damn it, why is this happening to me? I come from a top company. Even though I'm lowering myself by applying here, why can't I get the job? Maybe it's your attitude that's coming through in the interviews. Ha! Don't act like you know anything. Your workplace is a lower-ranking company anyway. That's harsh. So, you think so? I'm just speaking the truth. My husband took out his frustration on me. He had always been controlling at home, but his verbal abuse escalated significantly. Eventually, unable to find a new job, he settled for a part-time position working only 3 days a week, claiming it was due to job hunting. His income dropped to around $700 a month, yet he continued to act arrogantly toward me. My view of him deteriorated daily, and I regretted marrying him more and more. I found myself constantly overwhelmed with household chores and meal preparations while enduring his endless complaints. It felt like dealing with a teenager, and I was left physically and emotionally drained despite everything. I couldn't bring myself to consider divorce even though we had been married for less than a year. During this time, my husband grew increasingly bold, eventually setting a curfew for me and locking me out of the house. I wondered why I had to endure such treatment. After coming home exhausted from work and even doing the grocery shopping, he locked me out for missing the curfew. I was completely bewildered. Normally, I would consider returning to my parents' home, but since they had passed away, I didn't know where to turn. Desperate for help, I decided to call my best friend, Mika. "Hello, Mika, can I come over now?" "What's going on? Did something happen?" "My husband won't let me into the house." "What? Why not?" "Okay, come over right away." "Thank you so much." With that, I hurried to Mika's place. "Sorry for the sudden visit." "Don't worry about it. What happened?" I explained how my husband had locked me out of the house because I missed the curfew he had set. He actually did that. Yes, I can't believe it. It feels like he's being really abusive. Maybe his pride from working at a big corporation is making him look down on you. Oh, and I also mentioned my husband's sudden resignation. What? A part-time job? That's unbelievable. How can he act like this when you're the one supporting us? Yes, I'm thinking it might be best to leave him sooner rather than later. But we've only been married for less than a year. It doesn't feel right to just get divorced so easily. Karen, are you truly happy? No. My best friend looked concerned, pondering for a moment before offering a suggestion. I'm not sure if your marriage can be salvaged, but maybe you should start documenting his abusive behavior. You could keep a record or even make recordings. Really? I believe you should divorce him as soon as possible. And if you do decide to go through with it, I hope you can ensure he faces serious consequences. Yeah, you might be right. Exactly. It's important to document everything, and I'm here to support you through this. If you need a safe place, you can always come here. Thank you, Mika. My best friend was a tremendous source of comfort and support, and I was truly grateful. Having her as an ally gave me the courage I needed. To show my appreciation, I used the ingredients I had bought from the supermarket to prepare a homemade meal for her. This is delicious, Karen. You're really skilled at cooking. Really? It's been a while since someone praised my cooking, so I'm thrilled to hear that. Reuniting with my best friend after such a long time lifted my spirits. After leaving Mika's house, I sent an apology to my husband. Once he forgave me, I returned home. Have you really thought about what you did wrong? Yes, I realize I was wrong. I'm sorry. As I apologized with my head bowed, my husband's expression softened with satisfaction. As long as you understand, that's fine. Just be more careful next time. From then on, I did my best to meet my husband's demands. Despite my efforts, he often resorted to insults when he was in a bad mood. His words were belittling and dismissive, and each time they cut deep. I began recording these incidents, gathering evidence for when I reached my breaking point. My husband remained unemployed, only working part-time. It seemed he wasn't even trying to find a new job, as if he had given up. I was managing to support both of us with my income and handled all the household chores. He continued to complain and act badly towards me, trying to assert control. He seemed content with the situation, dependent on my salary, yet treating me with emotional abuse. I confided in my best friend that I didn't want a divorce, but my patience was wearing thin with his increasingly unacceptable behavior. I felt like I was at the end of my rope. How could he be so insensitive? How does he view me? Why did he even marry me? These questions plagued my mind. One day, after being forced to stay late at work, I arrived home past 7:00 p.m. Thankfully, my husband was out and hadn't returned yet, so I managed to get inside and began hastily preparing dinner. But he came home soon after. "Oh, well, welcome back." Noticing that dinner wasn't ready, he looked displeased. "Why isn't dinner ready yet?" "I'm sorry, it will be ready soon." "Don't lie, it looks like you've just started." I apologize. I just got home. As we talked, I noticed he was carrying a bag from an expensive brand. While I was working hard, he had been leisurely spending on luxury goods. His selfishness was infuriating and inexcusable. Despite this, he continued to berate me, completely disregarding my feelings. "Are you incapable of learning, or are you deliberately trying to provoke me? You incompetent fool. If you neglect the household, we'll get a divorce. Do you understand?" In that moment, My patience snapped. Did he really think he was entitled to a meal provided by someone he treated so poorly? Fine, if that's how you feel, shall we get a divorce then? What? My husband looked stunned. I've decided to leave this house. Are you really serious about divorcing me? Yes, I can't continue with you. You're superficial, useless, arrogant, and the worst partner I've ever had. My words seemed to ignite fury in my husband. His face reddened and his whole body trembled with rage. How dare you speak to me like that? As a low-ranking employee, you have no right to criticize me. I have no use for a woman like you. With that, he pulled out a prepared affidavit from a drawer. I hadn't realized he had it ready, but it worked to my advantage. I quickly signed the document, gathered my things, and left. Now, I had severed all ties with him. Feeling liberated, I headed to Mika's house where she greeted me warmly. You've worked hard, now you're free. Yes, I wouldn't have had the courage to divorce without your support. I'm really grateful. Don't let your guard down. It's not over yet. He needs to face the consequences. Absolutely and thoroughly. I hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against my ex-husband for moral harassment. He seemed quite flustered, clearly not expecting a legal battle. Why me? And don't mess around. He erupted in anger. I was relieved to leave the details to my lawyer, avoiding direct confrontation with his outbursts. My lawyer methodically presented the facts and evidence, and eventually, my ex-husband seemed to resign himself to the situation. He had been blaming me for the divorce to his parents, but the lawsuit compelled them to seek the truth. Upon learning the full story, they were horrified and decided to disown him. Now that he had lost his support system, my ex-husband was left to figure out how to manage on his own. He continued living in the expensive apartment he had always coveted during his employment. Even after quitting his job, I had been transferring money to cover his rent. But now that we were divorced, he had to handle his living expenses, rent, and compensate me for his abusive behavior. With rent set at $1,000 a month and his income not sufficient, he was in dire straits and reached out to me for help. Hello, what's the problem? Help me, I'm at a loss here. Why should I help you? We have no obligations to each other anymore. But we once loved each other, didn't we? That's unsettling. What do you mean? Do you think you're entitled to forgiveness just like that? Do you realize how deeply you've hurt me? I'm sorry, I'll apologize properly. An apology like that means nothing to me. Every time I apologize, you get all self-righteous. It's clear you have no respect for me. Just so you know, my salary has increased. I'm now earning more than you ever did as a full-time employee. What? You used to belittle me for being in a lower position, but it turns out you were the one in a weaker position. Your contentment with a part-time job and failure to find a new full-time role only highlights your own shortcomings. No way. My ex-husband was shattered to discover that he was now inferior to me, someone he had once looked down upon. There's nothing more to discuss. If you contact me again, I'll report you to the police. Hey, wait. I declared this firmly, ignoring his pleas and ending the call. I had already blocked his number and intended to sever all ties with him. Later, I learned from my former in-laws that he had settled his unpaid rent with a loan and moved out of his apartment. He is now working full-time and living in a more affordable place. Despite this, he continues to make alimony payments to me on time, indicating that he's working hard with a renewed sense of purpose. However, that doesn't mean I have any desire to reconcile. I am now living in a spacious new flat with my best friend Mika. We fill our days with fun, conversations, evening drinks, and a peaceful, fulfilling life. I am deeply grateful to Mika for her support and plan to give her a special gift as a token of my appreciation.
Greetings. Am I exhibiting a lack of open-mindedness, or is my spouse perhaps displaying excessive naivety? A dispute has arisen between my husband and me, leaving me emotionally drained. My name is Alice, and I find myself in my 30s. My husband, Martin, and I share the responsibility of raising our daughter, Nia, who is on the verge of entering the 3rd grade. Our familial unit, previously including my retired father, now numbers 3, as my father has embarked on a 2-year overseas assignment offered by a certain company. The discord originated with the prospect of accommodating my nephew, Philip, who is set to commence his college education. Given our proximity to his chosen institution, Martin was approached with a request for Philip to reside with us during his academic pursuits. The proposition entails his stay until he achieves financial independence through part-time employment, yet specifics regarding the required savings or timeframe remain elusive. Personally, I harbored reservations about sharing living quarters with a young man whom I encounter primarily during extended family vacations. My home-based professional responsibilities further diminish my enthusiasm for the notion. Upon voicing my concerns to Martin, his response was unforeseeably defensive. His retort questioned my lack of trust in Philip, leading to an impasse where neither party was willing to yield. Initial discussions involving Martin, Thomas's wife, and Philip himself had exhibited unanimous support for the idea. Philip explicitly expressed his desire to be under our care. Martin, however, appeared oblivious to the underlying complexities, dismissing any apprehensions about Mia and regarding the situation with unwarranted optimism. Our disagreement persists, with no resolution in sight. As the proprietor of the house registered under my name, I proposed deferring the decision until my father's return, urging a collective discussion. Martin, however, resisted this proposition, asserting that involving my father was unnecessary and advocating for a swift resolution over the phone. This stance, coupled with his encouragement for Philip's independence, raised doubts in my mind regarding the sincerity of Martin's intentions. The house, though aged, offers ample space, leading me to suspect clandestine discussions between Martin and my in-laws, with Martin striving to maintain a favorable impression on Thomas. Communicating via text during work hours, Martin suggested that the decision could be made without involving my father, emphasizing the surplus of rooms available. Despite my reservations, Martin remained steadfast in his opinion, refusing to budge until a decision was reached, thereby exacerbating the existing deadlock. It is disconcerting to contemplate anyone's displeasure upon discovering that their relatives have been relocated to their residence without consent, especially when they are not present. Martin, however, exhibits a noticeable lack of comprehension. When I inquired about the possibility of our relatives residing rent-free simply due to familial ties, he asserted that they were willing to remit $200, deeming it sufficient for one person. The basis for the in-laws' notion of adequacy remains unclear, as I am convinced that this amount is inadequate by any reasonable standard. The question arises, does $200 cover only monthly groceries? I limit the absence of prior consultation between Martin, Thomas, and me. If only they had sought my input earlier, I could have engaged in a thorough discussion with my father. However, I suspect a reluctance to consult him in advance, perhaps due to his benevolent yet stubborn nature, leading them to anticipate certain conditions. My apprehensions deepen as I entertain the thought that clandestine machinations have been underway since they learned of my father's overseas assignment. Seeking counsel, I decided to confide in a trusted confidant, my close friend Rosalie, a relationship spanning back to our middle school years. Recognizing the gravity of my situation, Rosalie promptly adjusted her schedule and suggested a private setting to ensure our conversation remained confidential. It felt serendipitous as we hadn't caught up in a while. Initially engaging in light conversation, we eventually delved into the heart of the matter. I recounted the entire narrative to Rosalie, detailing Philip's request to move in while pursuing college, with vague assurances of financial independence. Martin, seemingly receptive, deferred the decision to me. Complicating matters, our residence is registered in my father's name, and he is currently overseas, adamantly refusing to engage in any discussion on the subject. In addition to these complexities, I have the presence of my daughter Mia at home. and the prospect of accommodating a male relative who is essentially a stranger leaves me uneasy. Given that the house is registered under Dad's name, securing his approval is undoubtedly imperative. My suspicions regarding the timing of this proposition intensify, particularly as it coincides with Dad's absence from the country. Overwhelmed with emotion during our conversation, tears clouded my ability to articulate my thoughts comprehensively. Nonetheless, Rosie, my attentive confidant, offered unwavering support. With occasional back rubs and gentle encouragement, she urged me to continue sharing. Rosie, after absorbing my account, proffered her insights and counsel. Emphatically, she advised seeking Dad's input before making any decisions. She admonished me for contemplating acquiescence after the fact, highlighting the importance of Martin and Thomas respectfully requesting this favor. Addressing the absurdity of a $200 rent, she questioned the lack of clarity on shared responsibilities such as cooking, laundry, and utilities. The prospect of shouldering these burdens, especially with Martin's frequent work-related absences, raised valid concerns. Whether Martin was cognizant or oblivious to these considerations remained unclear. Rosie, in support of my perspective, pledged assistance if needed, expressing genuine understanding. Buoyed by this interaction, I resolved to discuss the matter with Dad. Martin, however, preempted my decision with a text, absolving himself of responsibility and leaving the decision to me. In response, I firmly conveyed my decision to decline. Martin, perplexed, challenged my rationale, insinuating an aversion to inconvenience. His response, devoid of coherence, aligned with Rosie's earlier assessment, a lack of genuine commitment to assuming responsibility. Realizing the need for a more substantive conversation, I determined to engage with Dad at the earliest opportunity. Martin's underlying concerns about potential conditions were evident. Even if Dad agreed, stipulations such as a curfew, household contributions, and academic diligence would likely be imposed. Given Philip's involvement in karate, weekend attendance at classes might also be required to instill discipline. Failure to meet any of these conditions could prompt Dad to insist on Philip's immediate return to his home country. Yet, in the face of potential conditions, I acknowledged that if Philip truly required this favor, my inclination was not to be perceived as heartless. The following day, I reached out to Dad as planned. Understandably uncomfortable with the notion of someone residing in his home while he was away, he refrained from granting permission. Instead, he proposed involving a real estate agent to facilitate an alternative solution. After concluding my call with Dad, Martin returned home, coincidentally with Thomas, who happened to be in town on business. Seizing the opportunity, I relayed Dad's stance, stating that we couldn't accommodate Philip, but suggested seeking the assistance of a real estate agent to find him suitable accommodation. My directness provoked fury from both Martin and Thomas, who were evidently incensed by the change in plans. They expressed frustration, asserting that their relocation plans were imminent. Martin, in a fit of anger, questioned the need to involve Dad in the decision-making process. As Mia attempted to intervene, Martin's response escalated to the point of physical aggression. In a protective gesture, I interceded, only to be met with a forceful kick to the chest. While I feigned a retaliatory punch, I never intended harm. Martin, deflecting blame, asserted that Mia's fall was solely my fault, attributing 90% of the blame to me. Expressing bewilderment at the sudden upheaval in our harmonious cohabitation, Martin left for his parents' house. Parting with a defiant declaration, he warned against characterizing him as changed or abusive, shifting blame to my actions. Despite Mia's relatively minor injuries, my chest pain persisted, prompting a hospital visit the next day. A broken rib was diagnosed, and a medical certificate was obtained. Concerned for our safety, I requested my aunt's presence and took basic security measures, installing a simple lock. Life has undergone a drastic shift, with Martin opting to commute from his parents' house. He conditions his return on my apology and convincing Dad to allow Philip to stay. However, my sentiments towards Martin have cooled considerably. I believe cohabitation could be manageable if Thomas allowed us to live separately with occasional assistance. The insistence on living together remains perplexing. I question the fragility of familial bonds and whether distant blood relations should supersede the well-being of close family ties. Despite my contemplation, answers elude me. For now, my primary focus is ensuring a safe environment for Mia. Even if Martin were to return, my concerns persist, and divorce is now a consideration. My best friend, Rosie, was correct. The idea of letting a relative, even a family member, reside in a house under my dad's name is unthinkable. I plan to seek advice from my dad again. An update 2 months later. Following heated arguments about allowing my brother-in-law's son to move in with us for college, the divorce has been finalized. After informing my dad about the details, he expressed his intention to return to the country. I had a conversation with Mia, explaining that we would no longer be living with Martin due to the divorce. Though she seemed saddened, she didn't voice any opposition. Witnessing her emotional response tightened my chest, both physically from my rib pain and emotionally from the strain. In my search for legal representation, Rosie once again proved invaluable, connecting me with a divorce attorney. Martin, since returning to his family home, maintained complete silence, ignoring my texts. When Dad and Martin finally spoke over the phone upon Dad's return, Martin insisted that the broken rib was 20% my fault and 80% mine, claiming victimhood. Resisting further inquiry, Martin asserted, "I don't owe you any explanations." When the topic of divorce arose, he was initially defiant, telling me to proceed if I wished. However, during mediation, Martin's stance softened, leading to a settlement involving compensation for the divorce, child support, and damages for the abuse towards Mia and me. In a surprising turn, Thomas reached out to apologize, and revelations about Martin's undisclosed actions came to light. Initially, Martin had promised to contribute $200 for Philip's living expenses, a detail he had withheld from me. As it turns out, Martin was in discussions with his in-laws about them providing him with approximately $800. In essence, he was attempting to siphon off funds from them, explaining his vehement insistence on having us all live together. While Martin enjoyed golfing, a seemingly expensive hobby, I believed he was managing within his personal budget. The revelation that he harbored a love for gambling, particularly horse racing, dating back to his college days, came as a shock. Neither during our dating nor after our marriage did he display any signs of this inclination. Unbeknownst to me, he had been secretly accumulating debt, amounting to around $20,000, which left me stunned. Upon learning this, Thomas understandably expressed fury, condemning Martin for taking advantage of their kindness and exhibiting far worse intentions. Thomas questioned how Martin could resort to violence and emphasized that his change in behavior likely stemmed from the fear of his debts becoming public knowledge. When Thomas confronted Martin, he proposed a solution. Martin could stay at their old house, contributing some funds for living expenses while commuting. Thomas naively trusted Martin and felt gratitude, assuming the arrangement was settled. Upon revisiting this with his wife and acquaintances, they realized the imprudence of their behavior and extended a thick envelope as a gesture of apology. Clearly, it contained apology money. However, forgiveness towards Martin was not on my agenda. Despite being unaware of these financial matters, I still harbored trust issues towards Thomas. In my view, if they had the means to prepare that much money, they should have supported their son from the outset, aiding him in becoming self-sufficient and preventing the current predicament. I politely declined Thomas's offer, and he extended his apologies once more before leaving. Several months post-divorce, Mia and I have been attending counseling twice a month. Dad's return overseas prompted occasional requests for support from my uncle and his wife, contributing to a sense of stability. However, an unexpected letter arrived from Martin. Despite my initial reluctance to open it, I sighed and decided to read it before discarding it. The letter was disconcertingly self-serving, with Martin expressing regret for losing his temper and acknowledging his financial struggles. He insinuated that honesty might have offered a solution, questioned Mia's loneliness without a father, and asserted his commitment to change for the better. The letter concluded with a suggestion to reconsider living together as a family once his debts were settled. Recognizing the self-serving nature of the letter, I shared it with my uncle and his wife. Concerned about potential risks, they promptly contacted a lawyer to arrange a restraining order. The terms stipulated that any future contact from Martin would incur a demand for $1,000 in emotional damages each time. The threat of reporting him to the police for stalking was formalized in a document sent to Martin. Though apprehensive, my uncle and his wife assured me that they would handle the situation. In an unexpected turn, my in-laws, perhaps feeling guilty, are cooperating and monitoring Martin. Seeking Thomas's assistance through the lawyer revealed that Martin is currently mentally unstable. While still employed, he occasionally mutters to himself, causing worry even to Thomas, who has facilitated his counseling. The realization that Martin had taken out loans in secret and could resort to violence brought relief for the decision to divorce. Gratefully, I can work from home without financial concerns, and Mia is gradually settling emotionally while attending school. Hoping for calm days ahead, I aim for a peaceful life moving forward. My name is Ashley. At 32, I find myself deftly managing a desk position at a modest firm while also overseeing the affairs on the domestic front. Gilbert, my husband, and I encountered each other through mutual acquaintances, and we've now celebrated 3 years of marital bliss. The initial honeymoon euphoria has dissipated, leaving behind a settled tranquility. Our day-to-day existence is predominantly stress-free and harmonious, a cocoon just for the two of us. Ashley, did you truly infuse the suplex flavor with chicken bones and vegetables? My sincere apologies, but the entrance and the bathroom were not attended to with the meticulous care they deserve, revealing an aspect of upbringing that warrants consideration. Are you paying attention? During the summer hiatus, I found myself obligated to sojourn at my in-laws, where I assumed a role akin to a servant under the scrutinizing gaze of Carolina. Each respite brought forth a litany of critiques, a ritual that seemed to accompany every significant break. I perceived it as a norm, considering the challenges encountered by friends with their own mother-in-law dynamics. Patience, I believed, would eventually quell these discordant moments. Around that juncture, Robert, Gilbert's brother, entered matrimonial bonds. Robert, a reserved gentleman in stark contrast to the more effervescent Gilbert, welcomed into his life Sarah, a youthful and modern beauty 12 years his junior. The union, albeit seemingly unconventional, filled Carolina with exuberance, heralding the first Christmas with the newlyweds. As they were occupied with work until Christmas, the plan was for Robert and Sarah to join us then. Consequently, I found myself extending my stay at the in-laws' abode from Christmas Eve onward. This decision, however, intensified Carolina's zeal to delegate tasks and oversee preparations for the impending festivities. Are you still engrossed in cleaning? At this rate, Christmas will arrive before you complete your chores. Hurry and prepare the gratin, she chided. Oh, I can hardly wait for tomorrow. She's my son's young wife, and I must acquaint her with the intricacies of our traditions, she added with evident anticipation. Observing Carolina's fervor, I sighed in silence, a sympathetic witness to the impending induction of Sarah into the fold. On the morrow, I endeavored to assist Sarah, offering empathy rather than sheer jubilation at our shared circumstance. Around noon the next day, Robert and his wife Sarah made their entrance. Despite Sarah's seemingly flamboyant demeanor, Her demeanor exuded courtesy and left a favorable impression on me. In contrast, Carolina appeared preoccupied, diligently searching for any lapse on Sarah's part. First impressions, it seemed, held paramount significance. Ashley swiftly served the coffee and commenced preparations for the Christmas feast. "And you, Sarah, follow suit," Carolina directed, prompting a startled reaction from Sarah. "A son's wife belongs in the kitchen, doesn't she?" she added, guiding her son and his wife with a stern look.